Good morning, everybody. It's July 16th. Thank you for coming. And as you know, we are going to precede our regular overseers meeting and all of the items associated with that. And there are agendas for that if you'd like. With commentary, any commentary from villagers on the recommended changes to the bylaws and the dog waste ordinance, both of which are going to be proposed at the annual meeting for a vote by members of the village. People will be able to comment also at the annual meeting, but we thought it was not, we thought it was, we know it's important to get your feedback. Dan Webster had also put this up on his website, I think, and we got some notes back from Tim on that. So we'll take comments here, and Judy's going to be tracking them here. So what we would ask you, please, if you have comments, is to stand, state your name, and we'll move on from there. And if possible, since this again is a meeting before overseers meeting, we have plenty to do there, to keep your comments as concise as possible. That would be great. So I'll start with the first person who'd like to jump in. Dan Webster.
You didn't tell me where to stand, so.
Perfect place. Well, there is a camera catching us. It's actually right there.
I made a copy of my comments for the overseers and the president and Amy, just so you have them in front of you. But for the benefit of the audience who I have my back to, I'll go through my comments. First of all, thank you very much for undertaking this process. I think it's been, I guess, 5 years since the last update, and I appreciate the effort that's gone into this. Most of my comments are of a clarification type of nature, so I'll just start at the top here. In the preamble, you make the reference to villagers, which I think is a fun reference, but you don't necessarily say what villagers are. And I think in the context of what the preamble says, villagers are meant to suggest somebody that has the ability to vote, that's eligible to vote in the village. So you might want to consider clarification in the preamble. In the section on the president, the bylaws state the president shall appoint the members of such standing and ad hoc committees as advised and recommended by the Board of Overseers. I tried to interpret what that meant, and I wasn't sure. You probably, in your discussion or the committee's discussion, talked about this in more detail, but are the overseers advising the president on what the committee should be and who the members should be? Or are the overseers just advising what the committee is, and then the president has sole discretion as to who he or she chooses to be the members of that committee? I didn't think that was clear in the way it's stated. In the treasurer section, I think you should change the income and disbursements to income and expenditures, or whatever the proper name of that report is. It's used, both instances are used in that paragraph, and I think you might want to have consistency there. In the deputy treasurer section, I was wondering what's meant by in the absence of the treasurer. It seems to be very vague. And I note that there's a similar statement in the deputy clerk section. In other words, it says the deputy shall step in the absence of the treasurer. What does that mean? Absence for a minute, absence for a longer extended period of time. In the overseers section, I understand the overseers can now participate by phone. I was curious why an overseer participating by phone is not considered to be part of the quorum. That just seemed odd to me. That might be part of Maine law. I just am not familiar with it. In the vacancy section, you should clarify, I think the intent is that the replacement overseer that's elected at the next annual meeting to replace a vacant seat is elected for the remaining term of that overseer. Otherwise, it would be assumed that the new overseer would be for a 3-year period, and you no longer have the staggering that you're trying to get in the board. In the standing ad hoc committee section, the way I interpret it is these committees are established at the meeting that you have immediately after the voting in of the new officers and overseers. And I was just wondering, is that realistic? Is that appropriate? Because it doesn't give the new board and the new president the opportunity to understand who might want to serve on what committee, what members of the public that are available to serve or want to serve might be interested in serving. So if you do it, I think you're talking about the meeting that happens right after the overseers, the annual meeting. At least that's the way I understood it. Oh, in your bulleted list, communications, I think should be communications committee. And, the committees are required to publish agendas. As a property owner in the village, I'd like them to also publish their minutes so that we understand what happens at those meetings. In the annual meeting section, this is just a cleanup. I think the 7 references to 7 days before should be not less than 7 days before, so you don't have to publish it on exactly the 7th day before. There's a capitalization issue. I mentioned in my notes here that annual meeting should be capitalized. And again, 4 public places should be changed to not less than 4 public places, so you don't have to just put it up on your 4 of your boards. In the registration of voters section, I thought it would be helpful to state what the eligibility requirements are for voters in the village. In the prevention of fire section, you reference the when overseers judge something to be dangerous to the lives or safety of the citizens, and I thought you might consider amending that to or property within the village, because you're also trying to protect property. In the police officer section, where you talk about the pay and the term, I thought it might be appropriate there to have an introductory sentence that is, if you decide to have a police officer, you do something similar on a village agent, but you're sort of presuming that you're going to have a police officer, which makes it sound like almost a requirement to do so. And then just the phrasing correction in the where it says shall not exceed 1 year, I think it should say any such appointment shall not exceed 1 year. And sorry, I got my underlining wrong there. And then in the wharfmaster section, I have some suggestions there just on sentence structure, because I think it was a little unclear to me what you were trying to say. I think that is supposed to be an uncompensated role, but you don't mention compensation there, and you do in the police officer section. And the same thing for the tree warden. I believe that's an uncompensated role, but you don't note that. And then I had one comment that's probably already been caught in the dog waste ordinance. In the last sentence, the B should be by, and the word was incorrect. I had one comment on that, which is, did you or did the governance committee suggest any sort of fine for incessantly barking dogs as well? I believe Northport has such an ordinance, so maybe it's not necessary in the village, but that was my last comment. Thank you for indulging me.
Thank you. Judy?
Thanks, Danny. That was incredibly helpful. We did not consider incessantly barking dogs, but this is a good time to remind all of you that the dogs are governed by the town of Northport's ordinances. They're the ones who have the leash laws or the under control laws, and they're the ones who are responsive. I've seen instances where they actually do respond to barking dog complaints. The only reason we're allowed to have a dog waste ordinance is because the town doesn't have one. But please, if your neighbor's dog is barking, please call, not us. And the other comments are, as to the bylaws, are great. As to the vacancy language, that is a quote from the charter. So if you think of the charter as our constitution and the bylaws as our laws, you can change the language in the charter through this, and that's why it starts as quoting from section 16. So if there's some confusion as to that particular language, as to the vacancy, how you appoint to vacancy, we can't do that. We can only remind people that there is a provision in our charter to replace, and it's until the next meeting, the next annual meeting. What we would anticipate doing is the same thing we do for the Utilities Committee, is if someone passes away or has to resign from the Board of Overseers, a vacancy to be appointed in accordance with the charter to fill for the next term, the next annual meeting, and then at that annual meeting, that term will be up for only what's remaining for it. Okay?
Just a note here, by the way, which is that the governance committee, since members of the public may not be aware of this, the governance committee did look at additional documents that relate to how the Northport Village Corporation is governed, including the charter. So we did look at the charter and say, are there sufficiently important changes that we might consider in this? Because as you may know, to change the charter requires the approval not just of this organization, this community, but of the state legislature. So it's a big deal to change the charter. So we looked at it, we considered some, we saw some areas where we might nudge it a little bit, but nothing of a scale that rose to that level, which is why we sort of put the charter aside and said we're going to focus on the bylaws. And that's what is that's where we landed in terms of where we could have the greatest impact and benefit for the village.
And the final, I think, real meat that you had, not to suggest that the rest was fluff, everything was great, but in terms of the voter eligibilities, that voter eligibility is expressed specifically in the charter. We could put it in the bylaws, but I follow David Burns' immortal words and talking heads, say something once, I say it again. And we do have a voter registration event every year, and that is, for instance, it'll be next Saturday. If you're a new property owner, come, after you spend money at the Mother of All yard sales, come on up to the porch and visit me with your new deed. And all of those eligibility requirements are set forth in that notice, and this is posted all throughout the board. So there are reminders on an annual basis as to how it is you get to vote here, and that is having the good fortune to own property here, or live here and be a registered voter in Northport. That was the two, basically the two. You have to be over 15. So we could put that all in, but then it's lots of words that take away from the effect of what bylaws try to do, which is organize the meetings. As to the comment on when do we appoint a committee, we appoint committees at our first organizational meeting, which is always the meeting in August or September, not the one that we get sworn in downstairs, or whoever gets sworn in downstairs. And so one of the first things we do is dig up who wants to be on the committees. And I understand, but I think Danny's comment about clarification is important. I understand that what the overseers give their advice and guidance to the president, both as to the nature of which committees do we need. We have standing committees. We also have decided to have committees. And we give you advice as to who has approached us to be on the committee, who's helpful on the committee.
My experience, both as an overseer and as president, is that it is a collaborative process, and that there usually are not dramatic shifts year to year in terms of the makeup of committees. There could be. There are additions, there are deletions, or people say, I can't or won't do it anymore, and there are new people we say they would be great committee members. So there are changes, but the president looks to the committee and the committee chair to say, I think this would be a great group of people to help advise on a particular subject. To be honest, for some committees, there's a committee of one or two, because it's not deemed to be necessary, or we can't scruff up the people to make it more than that. So I also want to kick back and not sure about, I agree with the concept behind minutes for every meeting. It's not always feasible or logical to do that when it's one person who says nothing happened or I made a phone call. So we'll dig into that piece of it. In terms of when the committees are put together, yes, it has traditionally been, we have not always had an August full overseers meeting. This year we will for the first time. Granted that it will be this year a new set of overseers we're expecting. It will probably be the September meeting, I suspect, when we'll organize committees for 2017, 2018. Because it'll take a little time for people to get to know one another and to pull those ideas together, including soliciting comments, I think, from Village. I think it's a great idea to be out there asking people if they would like to be members of committees.
I wanted to also say the thing about the quorum. we have to remember that although we have the word corporation in our name, we're really a village. So we have to look at the public meeting laws. And the public meeting laws that we have to honor are the municipal meeting laws. Municipal meeting laws require the presence of the municipal officers, who are the overseers. So we have managed that by saying the quorum has to be physically present, but we've been working hard to accommodate the talent that goes beyond Maine, who's willing to serve here. So we want their participation, we want them to vote, but the last thing we want is to have a vote that we take to be deemed to be invalid because we didn't honor that most basic rule of being present.
And Judy, is being present anywhere defined? Because that could have changed over the past 100 years.
It could have changed, and so we do look at the public meeting laws all the time. It's Title 4, sections, blah, 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 blah. It changes all the time, and no, it hasn't changed.
It's a physical presence in the room.
It doesn't say physical presence. It says must be present. It doesn't say presence shall mean blah, 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 blah. And we don't want to be the one that gets our decision to do a bond or whatever we do be the test case. It's villages like us, like Isle of Springs, like Mayville, who are going to be the ones who step into that trap because, you know, your selectmen in Northport are physically present. Your village overseers might not be. And it just says presence.
Tim?
Yeah. Tim Samway. I was on the governance committee with Judy, John, Vicki, and Blair. And just the two comments. Judy and I had discussed it, and I agree somewhat with her that less is better. But Dan's comment about having a citizen's note in the preamble regarding eligible voters, and I think is well taken. It has nothing to do with the bylaws as such, but I think that if you go to Section 8 of the charter, it clearly says who is eligible to be elected or appointed, and if you go to Section 12 in the charter, it defines the legal voter. And I think the two sentences in the citizen's note in the preamble, I agree it's repetitive, but it's a good place for it. I think people are more likely to pick up the bylaws than they would the you know, the other notices. So it's not part of the bylaws, but it would be a good note. And Danny's notes are well taken.
Dan, thank you very much. You went through it with a more finely toothed comb than I think any of us did.
I don't know if that's true. It's just that every time you take a fine-tooth comb to something, you find more lice.
As finely toothed a comb as we did. Any other?
Beverly Crowfoot, I would ask Judy why you increased the term of office to 3 years, what the rationale was, and had you considered the possibility that you might want to impeach somebody who has a 3-year term?
Yes, we did. I'll do the first. I always quote Vicki on this. Vicki has, this is her 3rd year, and she's an incredibly effective, I think, member of the board. And she describes the experience as the 1st year listening, the 2nd year questioning, and the 3rd year participating. And we want to capture that talent that we grow. By staggering it, we can also assure that we're always in a place where we're getting the new perspectives of people. There was also comments by John that he felt that if people felt that they were elected for 3 years, they would feel they could add more meat, and maybe we could get more people willing to do it. On the other hand, you might get people saying, oh, 3 years, forget it, which is why we have the resignation part. So it just seemed to us that it's been something that's been working really well in the utilities trustees for about the last 10 years.
Except we can never remember who's got what term.
And we're going to be much better about knowing whose term is whose. We hope. And so we felt it was a way to capture some of the talent that we're building but not yet using. With regard to impeachment, we talked about that very late in the game. In fact, the governance committee did not think of it at all. The overseers, when they were reviewing a draft, talked about it. We didn't circulate any particular drafts, but I did do some pondering on the nature of recall law and reminded myself that you can recall any elected official, but the person who recalls the elected official is the person who elects the elected official. So a recall would need to be by the annual meeting, by the villagers, not by this body. They could not impeach, and then the state recall laws would govern.
So does that mean it has to be on the warrant that is published for the annual meeting, or is it something that can come from the floor?
It would have to be on the warrant, and it would also have to comply with the main recall law, which you can imagine is not as good as Wisconsin's.
And that being on the warrant means that the overseers have to approve that warrant item and
Well,
agree to have it on the warrant.
Well, you'll recall that in 2012, the bylaws, and this were amended, or it may have been even sooner, and it's still in here, that citizens can compel the introduction of a warrant item. If they circulate a petition for 15 people, can
So
sign a
get on the
petition,
warrant.
present it to the overseers, and compel them to put that warrant item on. And it's identified as a citizen's warrant, as opposed to one that's authorized by the overseer, unless the overseer signs the petition.
Just,
Lee?
go ahead.
This, been in the past, certain times when overseers either couldn't come or wouldn't come to the meetings. And they were encouraged to get done. They were removed that way. Tim kind of reminded us of that, so.
Just to comment on Beverly from the committee, when the charter was written in the early part of the state, that the selectmen in various towns and offices served one-year terms. Subsequent to that, in the 20s and the 30s, the state legislature allowed towns to expand the selectmen, the school boards, to multiple terms, to 3-year terms. And so that was part of, when the governance committee looked at going that, it was bringing it up to date.
And Beverly, we had a discussion here about this issue of what if X months or years into a term, it's clearly not working out. And did we want, how formal did we want to be in terms of writing something in to allow that removal? And it was, for now, the feeling is that given the size of this community, the degree of interrelationships here, and the degree of amiability we want to maintain in this room, that we would work on the process of gently advising rather than writing something that was more strict. That may change down the road, but for now, that was where we were at. Other questions or comments? Sir, Mr. Huntoon, you don't have to get up.
Second page, you talk about what happens when you can't have a quorum, and you use recommendation, reasonable.
Accommodation.
My feeling is that should be changed to a not to exceed. Some history. As most of you know, I was there for an infinite number of years. The most I ever had to spend on something where I couldn't get a quorum was under $4,000. I think a reasonable figure might be 10,000 because supposing John's president and he's off skiing in the Alps, and we have a big problem here that's going to cost some money, and you can't get a quorum, I think the guy that's chairman is going to feel somewhat unhealthy is not the word I want to use, but if he has to spend the money. But if he's given a money not to exceed, I think he's more likely to do something in a hurry.
What's the language now?
Yeah, I'm trying to, under the president, top page 2, it says, the president in such emergencies shall have authority to take only such minimal actions reasonably necessary for the preservation of the corporate property and the preservation of health and safety of the public and private property within village boundaries. And he's wondering if there should be a ceiling on that. But my personal view is, one, I don't want to be amending these next year or 4 years from now. So I don't want to be thinking about inflationary rates, and is 4,000 still sensible? I think with the language, minimal action, reasonably necessary, you've got your parameters that you can only do so much. That's what it says. What does it take if the wharf washes away and it's going to take the parking lot with it? You bring in what you need to do to save the parking lot because the wharf is already gone. That's the minimal action reasonably necessary.
Also, a comment on ad hoc committees. Experience shows that they are not only done it right after the annual meeting, but it will come up sometimes in the middle of the year or something. And I think people should understand that ad hoc committees are any time that the people feel it's necessary.
Is the language not?
No, I mean, the way the discussions have gone here.
Yeah, Danny made a question as to, well, is it thus far and no further? You know, is the meeting right after
Right.
August? Thank you, sir.
Any other comments or questions from attendees about the bylaws and or the dog waste ordinance?
Dog waste ordinance says $25 is the fine
Per incident.
seems, though, my wife thought it was low.
I'm a cat person, so I won't comment.
So am I.
Wendy?
So have we ever fined anyone?
We never had a fine before. That's one of the corrections that this makes.
So do we think it's enforceable?
It is enforceable.
But, I mean, so who do we envision passing out the fines?
When we wrote it, we thought it would be the cop. So now it's the But Wendy's questions actually, I think, are steering us towards another issue of this governance committee. When we all sat down and looked at all the ordinances, we didn't pay particular attention to our fire ordinance. Peter Allen was the moving force behind that. Back in the day that we were having serious problems with people starting bonfires on the beaches too close to vegetation, too close to cottages. So we felt, well, that's new, that's fresh. Peter did tons of work, we're not going to do that. We're having a lot of complaints this year from tenants in particular of people who rent with the burn pits down on the water and even on the property burn pits, and fire being used recreationally but without respect to the people around them. We do have a fire ordinance. We are going to need to work on it to deal with the very enforcement issues that Wendy and the safety committee have been grappling with. But since we have so many wonderful people here, it is wrong to have a fire within 75 feet of vegetation or structure. It is wrong to have a fire if it is going to bother someone else. The warden will be called, the sheriff will be called. So if someone is doing that in your rental property, then tell them that they can't do it. Because one house goes down here, everyone else goes down here. Just ask Rex and me.
But I think that there's a different, we started talking about the dog ordinance, okay?
Right.
So we addressed the dog ordinance because to have an ordinance, you had to have some, again, parameters, right? You had to have a fine and limitations. Whether it's enforceable or not, that remains to be seen. Hopefully it'll act at least as a deterrent. and the other's to let people know. But is it basically, I don't expect Bill to go look around for poop, and then, you know, you gotta find the person at the time of the thing, and whatever. But I was sort of hoping it, you know, and as a close village, that people would more or less police themselves, and everybody be educated as to what the expectation is, and we start there. And maybe if we had a cop here. But, and as far as, you know, if you as a citizen see somebody's dog and you want to make a complaint, I think, you know, we can try to address that. That's different than the fire. The fire, there is recourse, and we had some communications of who do you call. You don't call 911 if somebody's blowing smoke in your house. You call the sheriff because we have a policy, right? I mean, that would be, but there was a question as to who should they call if somebody is breaking this particular law. So they're two different things. And when we looked at it, the fire ordinance, we looked at it and we sort of said, well, it covers everything. And I think it still does. It's just nobody, again, nobody knew what the recourse was. And nobody, and this it seems to be a repetitive thing this summer, nobody was exactly sure what the recourse was when somebody had a complaint. The complaint is to call the sheriff.
And but for both of these, from an enforceability standpoint, that if it is the police, and in the summer we don't have a police, that is only 40 hours a week, you know, 8 weeks of the year. And so my question is really, do we expect these ordinances to be implemented year-round? You know, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And if that's the case, it has to be more than enforceable by the summer policeman. It has to be enforceable when we don't have a policeman around, since it is
right.
so limited.
Right. And I think we need to change the paradigm of the structure of that sentence. We do have police. We always have the Waldo County Sheriff's Department at our beck and call. That may be something that is a promise exercised in its absence, but even our police officer, when we have one, is deputized by the Waldo County Sheriff's Office. So we ought not to feel today that we are powerless in protecting ourselves and our property. We have the same power we have in the winter.
And that's, so it's the Waldo County that is responsible for us. Okay. I was unclear on that also.
But let's address these two issues because they're separate. The dog waste ordinance is unique to Bayside. The town of Northport does not have one. Waldo County does not have one. And so I don't think it's realistic that someone should be calling the Waldo County Sheriff saying, there's dog waste I want to complain about. So that is an issue. A separate issue is the fire one, and I agree with you on that. I agree also with what Vicki had said, which is that the intent, at least now, of the dog waste ordinance is to gently remind all the people who live and rent here that there are standards which this village attempts to uphold in terms of how we exist with one another. And let's see where this goes. You know, let's give this, I would suggest, a year or two and see if it makes a difference to have a dog waste ordinance. And if it does not, then we can address the issue down the road.
And as far as enforceability, I did call a couple of the rental companies, and they're not dog friendly. So, but again, my feeling is communication, and you know, that good neighbor pressure.
Joe?
In times past, we've used the billing system for the water and sewer to put out information. I think it might be helpful if you include a little slip of paper saying that we have a fire ordinance and a dog ordinance. That way everybody will know about it.
Everybody is a customer. That's not everybody.
No, but it's 90%.
Joe? Yes, Dan.
In that regard, there's actually a flyer that the safety committee put together in 2013 that you might include. It has not just the fire, comments about the fire, but also other things like the war.
And Beanie told me that they were working on an updated version of that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, there you go. Any other?
I have a comment on the dog ordinance. It says that shall be placed in appropriate containers. I envision containers sitting around the village with the word appropriate on them. Is that?
Trash can. Your trash can. A trash can.
My product,
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So throwing it
Top of
over
your
the bank
fire.
at the bottom of Clinton Street is not
No, throwing it into the ditch with your kitty litter disperser is not appropriate either.
You can't just toss it under the bushes.
No.
Other questions or comments regarding the bylaws of the dog waste ordinance? Again, people will have an opportunity at the annual meeting to comment also, so although there we will actually be voting on the proposed recommendations. Wendy?
So what's the next step? Have we agreed to all of the modifications that people have suggested, and are we going to do a?
At the close of the public meeting, we will start the overseers meeting, and then in the governance committee section, we will be actually voting on the bylaws and to see if we want to make the further corrections and changes that have been recommended by some people here. And then those, whatever we vote on, will be what is the thing that is approved or disapproved at the annual meeting.
So we're asking the villagers to authorize the overseers to revise the bylaws after the meeting.
No. Today, we will be incorporating some, all, none of the very good comments we've received today. Today, we will vote on those incorporated, some, all, or none. We will then print up those documents, and they'll be here. The finals will be on the website with your indulgence, Dan. And when the villagers vote on August 7th, 8th, they will be voting up or down for that document that you will see, which is this one, with some, all, or none of the changes that have been discussed at the public meeting, which is about to close. But they can only do an up or down vote at the annual meeting. They can't say, I vote for the change in paragraph 1, but not for the change in paragraph 2, which is why the public meeting was important. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Further questions or comments? Hearing none, I'm going to close this public meeting that we've had on regarding the bylaws and the dog waste ordinance. Thank you very much. And we're going to move into our regular overseers meeting. And there are agendas. Do people need agendas? Anyone who wants one? They are copies available.
I forgot one.
Here's one. And we'll start, as we always do, with approval of minutes of the June 18th meeting. Now, I know that there were changes to that document, and Amy got out, I understand always the reality of the scenario, but relatively late, a clean version. So first I'll ask for approval of the minutes, and we'll see where this goes to. Do I have approval of the minutes from the June 18th meeting?
I move to approve.
John, second. I'll take Paul Myron. Any discussion? Hearing none. Oh, sorry, Judy.
No, I voted.
Oh, hearing none. All in favor of the June 18th meeting? That's unanimous. Thank you. Our next section, our next moment in the meeting is questions and issues from Bayside residents and meeting attendees. I will note that I've added 2 items to the agenda, which are not going to be permanent items, at least as long as I'm president. One is a report of the office manager, which is going to take place after the report of the village agent, because Amy usually has something to say, and I want to make sure she has the space for it. And secondly is a report of the tree warden. The tree warden is not here today. The tree warden did issue notes to the overseers in advance of this meeting, and we have some updates on those even. I've moved this further down the line, but I understand that there may be questions or comments regarding tree issues up front. So we can deal with those and take those into consideration, and I'm happy to move that around. But I would like that to be a permanent spot also, even if the tree warden's not here. I think that's a sufficiently important item on the agenda. But all that said, does anyone have something they would like to say? And so please identify yourself. Yes, ma'am.
As you know, they paved another part of the road. And
Which road?
I know that that's the Northport, I guess, town of Northport doing that.
Yes.
Shore Road, are you discussing?
Yeah.
This road, yes.
But they did a really sloppy job in front of my house. And I had been in touch with the town. And they came and looked at it. They didn't really do anything about it. And if you want to see the sloppy job, please walk down Shore Road and take a look. I'm going to continue to talk to the town because they have left, well, they supposedly fixed the apron that goes into my driveway. I'm not happy about that either. But I just think, I don't know when they're going to pave the rest of it or if that's going to be a year or 2 years from now. But it's very disturbing that it has made the front of my property on the roadside not quite pleasant looking.
We have a town liaison, Paul Narad. Paul, is this something that you're aware of the scenario? What might-
First I've heard of it, but I'll mention it the next selectmen's meeting.
So Paul connects between us and the selectmen at the bi-weekly meetings at the town of Northport. And so I think if there's any question about the property or what like that, I would request, Paul, that you be able to follow up on that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank
Can
you.
you just have the street address that we're discussing?
Yeah.
754
754 Shore Road.
Shore Road.
Tim, was there?
I would say the same thing at 614. They did a very poor job, and I had to contract someone else. The Eamon doesn't, the road commissioner, road agent in Northport doesn't have a answering machine, so if he doesn't answer the phone, he can't really talk with him. But, and I know that there are a number, Steve Trenholm for one, I know he's not in the village, but he was in part of that paving, and they really did leave very large from 2 to 4 inch lips on the driveways, particularly on the water side. I know that's one of the things that happen when you go with the lowest bidder. I mean, they did it in one day, and they were in and out, and if you weren't standing there asking him to correct it, the road commissioner wasn't around, so.
I did talk to one of the workmen because I could see what was happening. He said, "We're just doing the job, we don't live here."
Yes.
So that was their answer.
Do you think you need anything done there, Tim, or you just get it squared away?
No, I'm gonna have to have something, and I know Trenholm has to have, I know there are a number of people, and I don't think anybody expects the town to come out and do it, but at some point, they've gotta be aware of it, they just can't walk away.
They didn't dress the shoulder, that's the problem, along the whole length of the work area. They never dressed it up.
Any other questions or comments from attendees?
I'd encourage the people who came here specifically to talk about trees, who wrote us letters. First, I want you to know that we've got the letters, we've read them, but don't be shy about talking if that's why you're here.
Oh, I was gonna wait until it was addressed later, but I'm the animal fighter, and I submitted a letter last week about Auditorium Park, because we are concerned that the trees in the park and also over the ramp leading down to the beach need attention pretty quickly. We had a large limb fall last week, and we were very lucky that the cars that park under that tree were not there, nor were there any people standing there. The park is used regularly by adults and kids, and it was just sort of came to light that those trees need attention quickly. So thank you very much.
Anyone else regarding trees or anything else? Sir?
Yes, thank you. I'm the cottage owner adjacent to the, my name's Michael Terrell, to the yacht club.
Did you get the, sorry, Michael?
T-I-R-R-E-L.
Thank you.
This report of the tree warden, there's just a little discrepancy here from what, from my perspective, and I offer this politely. I'm not confirmed, I wasn't concerned so much about the health of the tree, as much as what I was hearing, some folks wanted the tree torn down or dramatically altered. And I was more concerned that we maintain the tree and keep it, so that it's there.
Which tree are you referring to, sir?
The tree that's referred to here in the report next to the yacht club, between the yacht club and my house.
Understood.
So you want to make sure that it's not the health at all. You would agree that it is a healthy tree. We just all want to trim up the canopy in a way that, preserves the health, enhances the health of
Right.
the tree.
I came into a situation where people thought it was my tree and that I had these opinions about the tree. Not at all, just wanted to be,
The word that I have heard the tree board use is thinning,
yeah.
thinning out.
And I had some concern too about the wire, that the electrical doesn't look like it's supported properly, which, and that was confirmed by the tree guy when he came out and we met.
Okay.
That it needs something to, because his view that if that wire isn't done properly, it could electrify the tree, which could put everyone at risk.
Right. Thank you.
I just want to clarify, I understood that you weren't asking for the tree to be cut down. It's an alternative answer to the issue that came out at the meeting last month about the tree. And there was some talk about whether or not this tree was able to be effectively pruned without causing damage.
Right.
To which we said, well, just take the tree down, that's another option. But we understand that it's not you asking for the tree to be taken.
Right, and in meeting with both the tree warden and the tree expert, he was of the belief that
It could be trimmed.
Yeah, it can be trimmed.
Okay, great. I think it's in the fourth paragraph, fourth long paragraph.
This is verbatim what she sent me, and I just printed it out for you. Other questions or comments from attendees? Hearing none, we'll move along. Report of the president. As you can hear, I've got various comments about items along the way, but I don't have anything specifically as president to report on right now. I have comments that will show up later on in the meeting, and I'll save them for those moments. And so I'll step aside and say, my good friend Steve Castellanos, report of the treasurer.
Well, good morning all. Warrants for your signatures per usual. So I sent out, I don't know if you had a chance to see them, financials for the half year. Amy has given you all a copy somewhere along the line. And Amy, do you have any spares by chance?
You want to come back? Okay.
So if anyone in the audience would like a copy, we'll make arrangements to get you some.
Anybody want one now?
If you're making copies,
What happens to the older people on this board?
3-point type doesn't do it for
I
you?
really, literally can't
Well,
read.
no, and I understand, and I can make an effort to do so.
I
This
mean,
is
sometimes
just
people
a
read to make
just a
a
can
4-page
thing.
document instead of a 3-page.
I'll see you guys, see what I can do.
Yeah, sure.
You should see the one I printed the budget that I can't. But at any rate, we're in good shape financially.
That's the important news.
I have no concerns. We're tracking well to our budget.
Sure you will. Ladies and gentlemen, please, treasurer speaking.
There are a lot of numbers.
Go ahead.
Very little has changed since last month in terms of what we have for available cash to work on infrastructure projects. Are there any questions?
You can have it.
Okay, good. Reserves increased by $7,500 over last year. We budget roughly $10,000. We're not able to do that because of the change in the way that we allocated the Maple Street projects. So not a bad thing at all. It just meant that we had to use some of those reserves to fulfill that obligation. We've added an ICS bank account for general government reserves. This is different than the money market account we had because it pays a significantly higher interest rate. If you take a look, back in March, we were earning 0.69 on the utilities reserves versus 0.12% on general government. In May, that number climbed to 0.85 on utility reserves compared to 0.30 in the general government. So now the general government is at 0.85 with utilities.
Can you explain that? 10 times 0 is still 0.
But we moved, our interest rates have increased.
Significantly, we have $317,000 in general government reserves, and about $180,000 of those are really funds we don't touch for any reason. This is a significant amount we still use for cash flow, but you know, that'll give us about $1,200 a year in income in this calendar year and more next year.
The differential is $1,200.
right.
Or that-
Between the previous money market account and the current?
No, the total revenue we'll receive will be about $1,200
Okay, in the interest.
in the interest.
Thank you. Judy?
Well, when you just use those nice words, cash flow, again, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that we have an audience. Our tax bills for the village are going to be due by September 1st this year. You are all used to paying by November 30th. Start saving your $1.20 per thousand now because the bill's coming.
When are the bills sent out?
They are usually sent out mid-July. They sent out at the same time as the towns. And the town's first payment is due September 30th, but our payment is due September 1st now.
So we've completed the Maple Street project, we've exhausted the infrastructure bond, and that account's going to be closed. So you'll see that coming up. And the software we use for Excel, Word, Microsoft Office products failed completely, so I need to replace that on this computer. We have a variety of options. I think a subscription makes the most sense. We do a student home version, which is about $55 a year. I don't really think that requires your approval, but if you'd like to approve it, then I'd appreciate that. And that's all I have to offer.
So I actually had a question, I didn't chime in when you asked. So for, under the bond, the long-term debt service, is that $6,900, the MMB bond interest, I noticed that there was no payment in the first 6 months, but that from a budget perspective, we have budgeted a payment. Does the payment just happen later in the year?
No, if you, were you here for the budget workshops? Do you remember that at all?
Not the one in June.
Yeah, so the bond, that particular bond was refunded, and what it does is forgives interest for the village for a period of about 2.5 to 3 years. When we budgeted for this year, we didn't know that. So we input the payment as we always had and found out we didn't need to make it. So it's about a $9,000 savings this year and about a $9,000 savings next year compared to what will occur when we go back to paying interest.
So maybe just a note on the way that you do some of the other notes to indicate what the discrepancy is, because right now that is what we expect. We just budgeted incorrectly because we didn't.
Because we got free money.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's a good thing, so that's additional money that we have at the end of the year.
And I'll have to go back and look, but I think I did that. One of the things that I've been trying to do is not repeat comments that were made. So this interest payment was made prior in the year, and I think at that time I made mention that we didn't have an obligation for that, and I may not have, but your point's taken.
Good, yeah. Any other comments on the treasury report?
I have a question. One, you started when we were still handing papers out by saying everything's great and we're actually in a good cash flow. So later on, we'll be talking about trees, the tree boarding discussion and expending the monies that we have been collecting ideas on. This is the year to do that, right? We will have money.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. Just for the audience, we have budget variances every year, some positive, some negative. This year we're running very, very well. We have about $9,000 in interest we don't have to pay, so that's a real plus. Our bookkeeping expenses are down. Our winter road expense so far this year is down. And there are a variety of other things that contribute. We've spent nothing in our police budget because we don't have a police officer. So depending upon how the year progresses and what the overseers choose to vote on, we have discretionary funds that we can use for things that were not originally in the budget. So doing extensive tree work, if that's what's required, could be a significant priority. We're looking at doing a lot of additional infrastructure work on the community hall because we have an opportunity to get caught up on some deferred maintenance we have not done over the past several years. So I think the answer is yes, you can only spend it once, and it just depends what you'd like to do.
Dan?
I'd like to thank Amy for sending out the draft minutes on a timely fashion every month. I appreciate that. Would it be possible to have the financials either attached to the minutes, or if you decide to send out agendas prior to the meeting, to have financials attached to the agenda?
There is variance between when these items are available. The agendas, I've tried to get on a schedule of asking for suggestions for the agendas 2 weeks in advance, such that a week in advance of the meeting, we're able to send to the overseers and to Amy to post the agenda. So a week out, I'm trying to keep us on a schedule, we have the full agenda. I'm not aware of the degree to which treasurer's report would also be available at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's available. Well, as an example, I received from our accountants the information I need to process these reports Thursday. So once I process the report, I distribute it to the overseers, and I think I did that at 6:30 in the morning on Saturday.
So I think the answer is actually simpler than that, that what Amy is sending out is the minutes from the June meeting, and we already have the financials from the June meeting, so it's easy to attach those to the minutes.
That's very easy.
Right, and it's the same thing, I don't think Dan is asking for the financials to be sent out before this meeting. And in fact, I would just say that I would prefer for the overseers to have a chance to review and comment on the financials, as well as the finance committee to have a chance to review and comment on the financials. Corrections made, and then be shared with the villagers.
So Dan, would that satisfy you that it's the prior meeting's financials that would be available?
That was one of my comments, and I think that they should be attached to the minutes, but also I think anything that's being discussed at the meeting is a public record, and for the public to be attending the meeting and to get these handed to them at the meeting doesn't give an opportunity to really be able to review them before the meeting. So even if they're marked draft, I think it would be useful to have available before the meeting. If you only get it on Thursday and it's prepared on Saturday, I understand that's difficult to do. And I have one other question, but I'll let you address that if you want first.
Well, I'm not entirely clear. Would you like me to have emailed that copy to you yesterday?
I think it would be helpful to have for me or any member of the public that might want to attend the meeting, just to be able to review it before it's passed out in the meeting, if that's possible.
Judy?
I just want to follow up on what Dan just said about this, and anything that's discussed at the meetings is public record. In fact, the definition of public record is much broader. You are entitled to have and receive anything that is generated in this office other than personnel data, legal advice, or contract negotiations. So at any time that anybody feels as though they'd like to know what's going on, pick up the phone, make a request for public access. I want all the emails between all the overseers from X date to Y date, and you're entitled to get them. You might have to pay a copy fee. You might have to pay an administrative labor fee for getting them, but absolutely everything is yours except personnel files, legal advice, and contract negotiations.
Dan?
I'd like to clarify that I don't want any of Steve's emails. I think you said, Steve, that there were $380,000 in reserves, more or less?
317.
Okay, and I'm curious if the overseers has a policy on what an appropriate level of reserves is. That sounds like a lot.
Yeah, and we talk about this regularly. A policy might be a stretch. What I can tell you is that Bill Cressy put into place some metrics a few years ago that try to compare us to other municipal entities. And now that I've done this for a couple, 3 years, I'm not sure those have a great deal of validity. So from a practical standpoint, I think it's good to have a year's worth of tax revenue in the bank should we need it. So that's about $226,000. The remainder has always been used to fund cash flow because we start our business the first of the year and we receive taxes in November. That's been the historical perspective. And that has cost us between $100,000 and $125,000 to pay our bills, pay payroll, and do the things we need to do until tax revenues start coming in. So if you take those, that's 226 plus 100 or 125, and we don't have enough reserves to really do that in a great way. We changed our tax due date to September 1st in part to reduce our use of reserves for cash flow. And it's still too soon to tell exactly what that's going to mean, but it looks like we're going to drop from $125,000 of usage to about $50,000. Now, if we do that, our reserves, meaning money that we could use to spend if there was a reason to do so, increases literally overnight. It's purely a paper transaction, there's no more money, but the money is more accessible because we do not need to use it to pay our bills. Okay? Now, I don't know, this is real simple and straightforward to me, I don't know if that's a real clear explanation here on the fly, but I think we need to have a year's worth of tax revenue in the bank. I think we need to then have enough money to cover our cash flow. And anything beyond that can conceivably be used to fund village projects. So you could define that, and I'll use a seawall as an example, it's pending in the next 2 or 3 years. If we happen to have $50,000 worth of what I will call uncommitted reserves, meaning it's not a year's worth of taxes, it's not our cash flow, we've got $50,000 in the bank that really isn't dedicated to any specific purpose, we could apply that to the seawall based upon an approval by the voters of the village. That means we borrow less money to do the seawall. Now that's one scenario. Another scenario is the overseers could say to borrow money on this will create a tax increase. So we're going to dedicate that $50,000 toward bond payments, so we don't have to increase taxes. So there are a variety of things you can do once you start freeing up reserves. I don't personally see $317,000 as being excessive reserves.
Joe?
One of the things that no one really catches is our reserves aren't all cash. If you look at the cash that we have in the bank at the present time and our total reserves, there's a substantial portion that's in fixed assets. So it's not all of this is really spendable. So that's one thing you need to consideration when you look into this whole thing. True, we have enough extra cash, and I have suggested that we specifically set aside some for the new work we have to do on the seawall. Secondly, the thing that needs to be brought to the attention of everyone here, and the overseers specifically, that even though Steve shows it as a profit and loss statement, it's really a cash flow statement, which is really very different. Because it takes into consideration funds that are capitalized rather than expensed. So that's another thing you need to think about. I also would like to suggest that you have assigned funds. This is money in cash that shows as cash, but you have to go through the statement to find the assigned fund. My suggestion, which is impractical in some respects, but practical also, is take those assigned funds and put them in a separate checking account. Say at where we have our latest loan, to give them some money. But if you're looking at the bank statement, you need to adjust for our actual cash flow and money that is surplus, because the other thing that shows on there that no one takes into consideration is accounts receivable from the utilities that Steve periodically puts into the checking account. And just as a personal matter, Steve, are you going to take the Maple Street thing on the balance sheet and put it into land improvements at some point in time?
So there are a lot of questions, and I'll try to walk through what I see as some of the key points. We do in fact have $317,000 in cash reserves. Those are not assets, that's cash.
You don't have that much cash.
Now, part two, we don't physically have that much cash because we're using it for cash flow. But we do, in fact, from an accounting perspective, have that amount of cash on the balance sheet. It is not in the bank because we use it for cash flow. And we can go into this in more detail if you'd like. This may not be the place to do it, but that's cash. So that's question number one. The assigned versus unassigned are the terms used by our auditors to identify any restricted funds, and restricted can be defined in a lot of different ways, but I'll walk through the current assigned values. We have $2,000 set aside to purchase a truck when the truck that we have eventually craps out. We still have $7,610 in that account to cover purchase of a cruiser. We're good, that's money we set aside some time ago when you were president, that's still in there. And we are still sitting on a balance sheet on $12,450 from the Centennial. That money is being spent down as we speak. So the unassigned balance, and the unassigned balance are just general reserves that are out there that can't be spent without voter approval, but which we haven't said go toward the truck, the police cruiser, or something along those lines, is $294,000. I don't personally see the value of putting it into a checking account or having specific separate bank statements for all of these. To the greatest extent possible, I'm trying to take what I will call reserves that don't need to be touched and put them into a specific account. So the ICS accounts that you're familiar with for general government today hold $180,000 of our total $317,000 in reserves. The remainder is distributed, either resides currently in our checking account, in our money market account, or has been spent in anticipation of taxes that are coming in September 1st. So that's a slug of things. Now, there's some more questions in there too.
Lee?
One of the other things that a lot of the people don't understand is these reserves, and I've heard this before, they think we have reserves so we can just tap into them for whatever we damn well please. That is a misconception. Reserves are there because if the unthinkable happens, say the war completely is taken out, it's gone, and we got to replace it, and it happens in May. What happens if this place gets struck by lightning and burns flat? What do? That's the reason for reserves. What happens if the town of Northport decides, well, we're not going to repatriate the money that we give to them? There are reasons for having reserves, and I get very angry when I hear citizens think that it's money that they can spend on whatever they damn well pet project they want fund.
Judy?
Well, just to parrot what, or to amplify what he has said, we have been scrupulous in maintaining a very flat tax line for many, many years. And part of it is because of the good Yankee spirit that Lee brings here, reminding us that it's not our money, but part of it is because it is our money too. We are the ones paying the taxes, and we know we're going to have a huge project for the seawall in just a couple of years. And as much of that as we can do and still honor that commitment to keep our taxes as flat as possible is what we're driven by every single day.
Ma'am?
Celine Boucher. I was just curious to know, in a number of years then, what has been the reserve goal year after year to keep?
Steve?
We continue to build reserves we have. We have never really established a goal, because we recognize the conditions I set forth earlier, having a year's worth of tax revenue in the bank and enough cash to cover cash flow, we have not yet reached. We have budgeted on an annual basis to put away $10,000 to build that reserve. And we've done that, as Judy mentioned before, without needing to increase tax.
And is there a projected point at which theoretically we might reach that goal?
We may be there this year.
Dan?
Thank you, John. That was one of my questions, and I didn't mean to upset anybody about the reserves. I completely agree that it's appropriate to have some level of reserves. That it'd be irresponsible not to. My question was more, what is the appropriate level of reserves? I recall from years past that the number was quite a bit lower than that, but I have to admit I don't know what the trend's been over the years. I would note that in your initial explanation, Steve, I had a hard time understanding why the $200,000, which is 1 year's worth of expenditures, is not an amount that could be used to address this timing issue between when expenditures are made and when taxes are collected. We also approve a line of credit, so we would have that additional flexibility. Why do you need to have extra money beyond the $200,000 to fund that? And you don't have to address that, but that was...
Well, I think I need to, because you raised this issue every year, so we might as well talk about it. You could absolutely do what you suggested. You could take that the tax revenue, 226, and you could actually fund cash flow, which means that in the course of the year, and this is just a really rough example, I have 226, I fund government to the tune of 100,000 for a year, I really have $126,000 worth of reserves. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The overseers have chosen to look toward a larger, undedicated reserve balance. So it's a question of philosophy. I guess if that's something you feel strongly about, that I'd suggest you make a plea to the overseers that we change the approach we've been taking to reserves. I don't see them, either one of them, as necessarily being good, bad, right, or wrong. Just two different approaches to do it.
Lee? And I would, by the way, we have a lot to cover in this meeting. I recognize the validity of all these comments. I think that if we're going into great detail about the philosophy behind why we dedicate funds the way we do, this may not be the appropriate venue.
One other thing that everybody, I've been on the board long enough to know that nothing stays static. What we spend, whether you're going to hire somebody to mow the parks or trim trees or plow the roads, or the job that different ones that work for the board do, it doesn't stay static. It goes up. So the amount of reserves that we're going to have is never going to stay static. We may reach it this year, but in a year or two, it's going to be more. I have a farm, and I know damn well that my costs are never going to stay the same. And this village's costs will never stay the same. We'll try to keep it within reason.
Thank you. Other, Wendy?
So I just have a comment after listening to this discussion that it might be useful at least once or twice a year to actually have a specific finance committee meeting. Either, prior to one of the overseers meeting and invite the community. I mean, obviously the finance committee meetings will be, open in general, but given that we have people here during the summer, it might be good to do that, get these questions.
That's a good idea.
And have the overseers and the finance committee be able to address them.
That gets people more excited than talking about income and expenses.
Some people.
Is that something that so in other words, what I hear you saying is that prior to the annual meeting, it would be useful to lay out the proposed budget and how we operate fiscally and invite people in to ask questions. Is that what I understand?
I think many governmental, municipal organizations do have finance committee meetings where they, advertise them and invite the public to. And again, it just seems based on this discussion that it would be good to, on a regular basis, do that. As a reminder as well to what our philosophy is and to get input from the community.
Understood. Judy?
I would simply say that, of course, the budget workshop, where we're discussing that type of philosophy in concrete terms, albeit, is always a public meeting. And from starting around March through July, that is what we're doing, is budgeting. So I know it's hard for people to come here every single month like we do, but, and I really welcome the idea of having a separate meeting about the finance. Okay, this is our goals, our finance goals, this is how we're going to achieve them, this is how we're going to do the math. But I'm not sure that the time to do that is March through June, because that's the concrete work we're doing, because we have to get that budget done by June. I really think that philosophical conversation is the August through October time. This is what we did this year. We're going to start to think of implementing those things, but based on the vote in 2018, how can we do it better? How were our predictions wrong? And how can, based on all the comments we get on these financials, can we get bigger fonts? Things like that.
And I would just leave it up to the finance committee to decide what the appropriate time is.
Yes.
This might be something to mention in your report at the annual meeting, is that we will be looking at having in the future, a public meeting annually, where we'll discuss these issues. Anything else?
So I just wanted to address the previous comment that Dan made regarding sending out the financials. Just thinking about it a little bit more, I think it would be very helpful is as Board of Overseers, we got into the habit of distributing the agenda and all of the attachments prior to the meetings. And again, other governmental boards that I've been on, that's the common practice. And that they're, we might ask Stan to distribute that for us, but then it makes it very convenient for the villagers as well as the overseers to have the full package of what we're going to discuss in advance and be able to look at it, prior to the meeting. Takes a little bit of an organizational structure, and if the overseers decide to do that, I'd be happy to help with that structure.
Thank you.
Just an FYI, we have a communication committee, and we have an office manager, and to my mind, that group should be able to pull that together quite easily.
Yeah. I had noted under the report of the Treasury approving the warrant for this 2017 annual meeting, a copy of which I'm holding in my hands right now. And Steve, I don't know if you want to talk through this or if you want me to.
So I have a question. Was that distributed to the overseers?
Yeah.
I don't
warrant
know. I don't believe I got a copy.
No.
Well, then,
I'm surprised, because I thought this was distributed to everybody before we had our budget workshop. And
This-
I believe so.
Yeah, this
was
was
my-
not distributed before the budget workshop, but this should have been distributed when we went through the final, we published it for the book, and I thought that it was distributed. So we will, it wasn't, we will go
It may
through
have
that.
been, it may have been a couple months ago, it wasn't this
No,
month.
it would have been since
Before the-
June 16th,
Right, before the-
or June 18th, so.
I think it might have been.
So what is the will of the overseers in terms,
Well, we
because
have
what we will
to
need to
sign
do,
it today.
we have to today approve it, if it's going to be what we present at the annual meeting, and sign it. I have a copy in front of me. What is the will of the
Well,
overseers?
first of all, let's make 7 copies. That's one thing.
Thank you. While we wait on that,
Is the annual report's not ready yet, right?
we'll move on with the report of the village agent. Bill?
Can you just hold for a second? I'm just getting the last minute quote here.
Absolutely.
You should wait for Amy and that's correct.
Yeah.
We can scribe while she's.
Yeah.
And I won't apologize, but I will explain to the audience that there are quite a few documents, as you can see, floating around this table right now, especially at this time of the year. And so we, sometimes keeping track of them all is an issue.
But exactly, and maybe with these documents, maybe they're going to be brought up at a meeting, even though that warrant might have been sent out 2 months ago, maybe even more than that if it's going to be brought up here, she would attach it again. I would assume that's what happened. I do believe we got it a couple months ago. Now that
You
I
got
think
the
about it, we
initial
got all
draft.
sorts of things.
Initial draft.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
you're
that's
correct.
what.
that's what, yes.
You're
So
right, you're right.
Did it change?
Well, it didn't change. It incorporated the budget that you approved. It incorporated the commas and it's the publication version, but
The new
You're right.
one,
Numbers
the new
did
one,
not-
the
numbers
one,
did not
the
change.
one that he
the
has.
numbers haven't changed.
The numbers are the
The
same.
treasurer's financial statement's in there and the,
Yeah, but I don't think nobody here got it, right?
so if Billy wants to give.
I have the contract paper for the Grant Littman for painting the south side of the community hall. He has his contract here that he'd like to have signed, and he's asking for, I think it was $500 payment to get started, and then the remainder for the second payment will be $1,190. And down below, no, just before that, I know we talked about the carpentry work. He's got it stated in here, any rotten wood will be placed at the carpentry rate of $35 an hour. And that's about standard, I think, for...
So 1,600 or so. And how does that jive with what we had estimated?
It's the contract we already approved.
It's the
Now
one,
we just need to sign
the
it.
one you already approved, so I just want to give permission for John to sign this, so I can get that back to him. Now, on the other part of the community hall, you would ask me to get an estimate for the front and the side and what has to be done on the back. So I have done that. I got one estimate verbally, not in writing, from people who paint that do a very good job for $5,500 to do just the front. Porch, stairs, the front of the community hall.
Who was that, Bill?
That was, yeah. I didn't write the guy's name down, I can't think of it right at the moment. It's the ones that's doing Blair's house right at the moment.
Paul Flag.
Paul Flag.
Oh, good.
That's from them. They do good work. And they'll prep and everything. Okay. I just got the last estimate back from the Grant Lippman, who is doing the south side for the front, the north side and the back. And he separated them out. So to do the front of the building, and that includes siding, trim, steps, decking, and railing, you know, and paint the whole front. $3,350 is what his price is to do the front.
So one was 5,500, and that's the gentleman who's doing the Blair's building, and the other was, say it again, I'm sorry.
3,350.
And who is this person?
This is Grant Lippman.
The same
Same
fellow.
guy, same fellow?
Same fellow,
So,
the other side,
for that,
Yeah.
just shy of painting. And
Siren painting?
Yeah.
And does Mr. Lippman anticipate doing that sequentially, since he's already here?
He would, he would like to. You know, he's getting ready to get to here because all the painters are behind because of all the rain we had this spring. So that's why he hasn't got to this yet. But I'm assuming with this contract, he was planning on pretty soon to get going on the south side. But if he gets the front side, I'm quite sure he wants to incorporate it all in at once.
Yeah.
Just makes more sense to set up once than it does.
Well, there's a difference in that painting the south side doesn't interfere at all with the operations of the community hall, whereas painting here
would.
Would.
And I'm quite sure he probably would much prefer to do it later on in the season.
Did you say that you also got an estimate for the side?
Yes. On the north side, the only estimate that I got was from Grant Lippman, and that was $1,800 to do the north side.
Oh,
Is that because the sun doesn't shine on
and
that
it's
side?
much less square footage.
Yeah. And it's not doesn't seem to be as intensive on Sandhill as the south side, I think.
1,100, I'm sorry.
The north side is 1,800.
800.
The back is basically just trim around the windows and that. That's only $600.
And that's again only from Grant Lippman.
That's only from Grant Lippman. The other guys didn't give me a quote for the other.
And the Paul Flag quote of 1,500 was just for the front.
Just for
to be
the front.
clear.
Yeah. And that includes
5,500.
5,500 versus 30.
5,500, right.
Well, I would move that we award the contract for the balance of the building. Sorry, I have a question. I'm going to withdraw my motion. Steve, can we afford to do the whole building today, this year?
Depends,
If we have to do tree work?
I mean, among other things.
Yeah.
You know, so some of the moving pieces, just to refresh your memory, is if we have,
This is hard.
if we have the grant come in from Belvedere for the windows, and or we have income that comes in from donations for windows, it frees up a lot of additional money.
Yeah.
Right now, I would say that you could do your tree work and you could do all the community hall, but that would be pretty close to consuming everything I think we have.
Yeah.
Vicki?
What was the date for knowledge on that grant again?
September 15th.
Okay, just for those that didn't do a quick addition, we can do the whole thing with this siren painting for $57.50, we're on the front for $5,500 with Mr. Flag, so. Did I hear you say that he'd like to do it later in the season, so that way we might not interfere with the
I would have to
activities?
double check with him, but I believe if we add this to his contract that he's got now, that means the south side will be postponed until he could do both of them at the same time later on.
And the whole building, Paul?
Or the whole building.
I'd like to know when his start date is. Seems like things have been dragging.
He held off because of the rain in the fall, in the spring. His other customers that he already had lined up from the previous year come first. So that's why he hasn't got here yet.
Still like to know a start date.
And with him sending us the contract signing and him requesting the $500 means that he was getting ready as soon as he finishes up where he's at to come and start this.
Now we're a customer. Judy?
I wasn't quite finished, actually.
Oh, sorry, I apologize, Paul.
I'd like to suggest also that we see how well he does on this side before we award him the front or anything further. He's a new entity to us. Flag is somebody we know has a good reputation. So, and he is quite a bit lower. So I'd have a little bit of apprehension, you know.
I believe on the Flag one, the reason that he told me that it would be a little bit higher is because his other painter is 80 years old and he's getting up in age, that they were gonna hire a lift to do the front, not work off ladders.
Yeah.
And that's like $300 a day to rent a lift. That's what he told me, so.
Yeah.
That may be why his price is.
Judy?
Has Flag ever worked for us?
No.
No, so in terms of the known entity, Siren and Flag are equal to us.
Not really, no.
We
I know Flag, he has an excellent reputation.
Right, and so does
This
Siren.
young guy-
I know Siren, and
You
so
know
I've seen his work down there at the Rossi house, not the Rossi house, the other house.
him? Norton?
Yeah, I don't know him. I've never had a beer with him.
He did the Norton house.
No, downfather, across from the Radcliffe. I can't-
So-
All right.
So my personal, I would like to move that the front of the building be awarded to Littman on the condition that he accommodate our Bayside Arts schedule and any other community events schedules.
Second?
Second.
Lee, any
Just the
discussion?
front, and then we can roll it.
Any discussion? Paul?
I still feel that we should segment it, award him the front if he does a satisfactory job with the south side, and award it to him later in the year, maybe late August, September.
Vicki?
I have a problem with that. If I was going to have somebody come to paint my house, I wouldn't say do the front first so I can see how good of a job you do, and then we'll talk about the other sides of the house. It feels to me like you're sort of putting some undue pressure. He's got his on the person who's doing the work. You do your due diligence prior to hiring them. So we could maybe ask the owners or whatever for a recommendation or an evaluation of his work or something. We can ask him for references. That's the way you deal with that. I don't think you break it down and screw this guy around and bring his stuff in and take his stuff out. His preference obviously would be to come in and do the whole building. The price is reasonable, I think, for this. I've painted a few buildings in my life, so it looks very reasonable to me for what we expect him. So that said, I'm wondering if we don't wait until after the season. I don't know how a painter would accommodate the activities at the community building, because it seems to me there's something going on there every day. I'm not sure what scaffolding he might have to put up to do his job. I'm wondering if we wait until after the 15th of September, if money's an issue, which it doesn't seem like it really is.
Well, Vicki brings up a good point about references. Do we have references on the case?
All I got
was a reference from you. You're the guy that, you're the one that met with the guy, you're the one that gives me the name of the guy and
Both of them.
and turned it to me, so I went with what you recommended to me at the time.
Kicks back. Judy?
We have already hired him, so, and we did, I recall that we did in large part because Paul is so talented and knowledgeable on these things, and it was a reference from him. So we have hired this man. My instinct, not my knowledge, but my instinct is that part of the reason we've got these bids now is because there is some economies of scale that he's bid into this, and he's trying to grow the business. Two good things. I think that you both make a really good point about the condition of access to the building being perhaps an untenable condition, and so maybe we should put it off till September. Maybe instead we modify it and just do the north side and south side. But this guy's gonna come here, his equipment's here, we've already said that he's good. So I'm concerned that if we put off this conversation, we're gonna be in the exact same situation we are this year, looking for painters next year. And we're gonna be saying, okay, someone's ready to do it in August. And that's not gonna work for us, so let's tease somebody up.
Okay.
You usually do the job when the weather permits. You can't go and start telling these people, well, we'll do it in September. Of course, we'll start having hurricanes and it'll rain all the time. You do the job when you can get the guy. And when the guy's got his equipment here, it costs him money to put the equipment up, to haul it here, to take it down. So if you're gonna do the job, let him do it all.
All?
I just want to clarify a point. I can't recommend either one of these people. I found them because they were referred to me. But generally, the practice for referrals is to get 3 references rather than just rely on one. And that's why I asked if there were other references.
John?
Bayside Arts last event is August 16th, so I don't know about other commitments in the community hall, but that's that.
Vicki?
Okay, I'm all in favor of doing it now and doing it all at the same time. I'm concerned what we're going to ask him to do as far as making it accessible. But all we're asking him is make it so we can get in, right? He doesn't have to take all of his
No,
stuff.
it doesn't have to be approved, yeah.
Just so I understand, the current motion is for
Only as the one side.
is for
So that
he's
we-
already doing the south side, are we adding on the front?
Right, and my thinking was that the cautionary tales that Paul is warning us of, that gives us more time to continue to evaluate his work. This is a credible businessman in the community, but if we only award one, we address both our financial issues. We don't know how much we're gonna get the grant. We don't know how much the trees are gonna cost us. Give him this, give him the second foot in the door. And that's a bad metaphor because he doesn't have a third foot, but just keep piecing it together with him. These prices are good, we should take advantage of them.
Wendy?
No comment.
Any further discussion?
Why don't we, I mean, we're talking $5,000 to $6,000. I mean, this is 1/2 of 1% of our reserves.
Exactly.
I mean, it's peanuts, guys. Why don't we let him take the whole building on contract with a provision that he does it up front to a non-interfering basis?
Is that an amendment?
No, it's a complaint.
It's a line.
It's a whine.
I would accept it as an amendment. I was trying to balance the interests that had been voiced around the table and find forge a consensus.
So I suggest that as an amendment,
A friendly amendment.
a friendly amendment.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment. I don't.
Is there a second?
Motion.
Second.
From Lee. Further discussion on the amendment now, which is to do the entire building
And assign it to Siren.
and decide to design. Paul?
Well, I thought we were concerned about the unexpected increase in income that we may be generating. Right now it's uncertain. I thought that was a requirement for expending further money towards the painting of the building. But if that's not the case, if we have plenty of dough, let's do it.
Further discussion on the amendment to award Siren the entire building, which is 5,500 or so, am I correct? 5,750? Further discussion? All in favor of the amendment to award the entire contract to Sarah? 6 in favor, all opposed? Abstaining? 1. Abstaining. So, I guess you can get back to him, Bill, and if he wants to either have a second agreement, or if he wants to revise that one, just let me know and I'll get a signature to you on it.
Well, and he doesn't want just the signature, he wants the deposit. So
The deposit,
I would
right.
suggest that since he has one contract signed and the deposit on that is only 500,
Let's keep going.
let's keep going and
And
get.
have a separate agreement.
And there's a second interim payment on that too, that you'll need to counsel him, Bill, that the contract is not enough to trigger the duty to cut a check. He needs to generate an invoice for that second payment,
Good.
so that he doesn't have to wait.
Excellent. Well, Bill, keep going.
Okay, I'm gonna put the tree thing, we'll wait for that. The next thing is I received a letter back from Steve. Remember last meeting, we talked about painting the structure on the dock. And as I remember, the Junior Yacht Club done that the last time. I've talked to Gordon a little bit. He thought that he would try to see if he could generate some interest. He wasn't sure. I received an email from Steve, and so we could go ahead and do that. I just would have to buy paint, some rollers, some trades, and scrapers and that kind of stuff. So we'll get them.
Super.
I'll work this out with Gordon, and we can go ahead with trying to get that done.
Excellent. And thank the kids.
And the CMP was in on Park Road, put in the new power lines. They did remove the electric light down by the end, so that has not been put back. So that satisfies last month's.
Yeah, for those of you, you'll recall that Ed Lord and John Dykstra each communicated with us about preferring no light than a light that was higher and shining in their bedroom, their respective bedroom windows. We committed to poll the other community members to see how they felt about it, and every community member said, that's fine, no light. So we will have one less light on our bill from CMP.
Next item is, we've had a problem with the mice problem in the community hall for years. At times, we've taken care of it. This past winter and this spring, it's been, just can't get rid of them. It was suggested that I go talk to pest control people to see what they could do. So I have a service agreement from Modern Pest Services to do that, and the way I believe this reads, it says total annual agreement for 1 year is $1,994 for the year. There's just a bunch of other things in here that I would want you to look at to make sure. We did have a complaint earlier when they had the Coughlin memorial service about the mouse poop that was in the cupboards and that. Well, all that had been cleaned out. Between the time it had been cleaned out to the time they had that memorial, it was repopulated again. So we just couldn't keep up with it.
Lee?
Why don't we go to get us a couple of cats?
Well,
and a kitty litter box. And we can have, and let them have free reign of the community center. I mean, that would probably cost us less than, are you allergic to cats?
No, but then we'll have to worry about the toxoplasmosis. The mice are a serious issue. They carry the Lyme disease ticks as well. So, I mean, if we're going to be renting this place out, we need to be dealing with it. So.
I mean, I got a cat at the farm, and it earns its keep every day.
And then leaves you the dregs.
Having been to the space you're talking about now, Lee, I think that there are more opportunities for egress and ingress to your barn than there are into the community hall for cats. So I'm not sure we want cats necessarily stuck in that space.
I have a fellow I went to school with, Ronnie Hawes. He ran the Agway store for years, and he had 2 cats and he had grain in it. And he had, before he had the two cats in there, he couldn't keep the mice out of the grain. I mean, they were in it, and this is a store. So he had two cats, and they stayed inside all the time. And he never had problems with mice again.
Who takes care of them in the winter?
He does.
If they're put here.
We're not gonna, he's not really proposing that we bring cats in, are you?
Oh, yeah.
I think he's serious.
I'm serious.
I move that Billy be
Eradicate?
approved to
Eradicate.
enter the modern pest contract proposal that he received.
Is there a second from Vicky? Any further discussion?
I love
Paul?
cats.
Who would change the litter box?
Further discussion of the proposal for 1,094 for an annual contract to start whenever we determine, I assume.
Yeah.
The later the better, because we'll get it into the beginning of next year too. Further discussion?
They're an excellent service.
Modern Pest, I know them too. All in favor? 6 opposed? Who's opposed? 6 to 1. The Billy entered that contract. Thank you.
Kitty litter's expensive, it'll cost you here.
Likewise, they'll need to generate an
Not
invoice if they need to.
$1,000 a year.
Right, okay. Now I'll let you guys, I don't want you guys to take this over, or let you get this over.
Is that an agreement that we have to sign right now?
Well, I don't know if you might have to. I haven't quite looked at the whole thing.
All right,
Sure.
keep going.
Okay, let's see. The other thing is, we've had problems with, we lost the lifeguard sign. It was told to me that it was stolen. In my thinking, it was taken, but not the way it was presented to me. We've had trouble with some street signs coming up missing. Also, the Ann Einstein Memorial plaque on the kids' playground was taken off. Finally, they found it was discarded in some mud. That had to be put back up. I've had a lot of people come to me and say, boy, there's an awful lot of beer cans down here in the morning. So there's been a lot of drinking on the dock at night. So I called John, and he told me to go ahead and order another lifeguard sign. Because one of the things was people asked me, why isn't the lifeguard on duty? And I said, well, he is. Well, no, there's no sign saying he's on duty. So that kind of alerted me. They didn't notify me. So that's in process. That should be coming in soon. Amy, I've worked with Amy. We've put the lawn contract out to bid, out to advertisement in the paper. That should be coming out next week. And I had an odor complaint in Kelly Cove. I spent 2 to 3 hours with that. I finally figured out what it was. It was on the beach. It's seaweed and leaves setting in fresh water, and the sun's making it, so it's deteriorating and making an odor. It is pretty bad smelling. Not constant. If the breeze hits just right. This person was very concerned. I went around, checked their property, other people's properties, and I said, it's not a sewer smell. It's deterioration. So I finally went down on the beach with a stick, pawed around with a stick with it, and the minute you did that, it's like, yep, there it is. Nothing we can really do about it. That's what happens when you live on the water.
Well, the moon tide will clean it out, right?
Yeah, because we haven't had any water flow through the brook either to wash it. So that's the way I left it with her. The next day I was down to the town hall, and they told me in there that this woman had called and da-da-da-da-da, so we told them there's nothing that we can do as a town of Northport. That's the village's problem. They have to go down and take care of it. And I said, thanks a lot. So then I tried to get back in touch with her, and evidently she left. So then I went and talked with Gordon Fuller, who's the harbor master, and plus he's used to work for the DEP, and I just explained, and he said, yeah, you're right, that's what it is, that's what's happening. And he said, I'll drive down by and I'll check it out. And I also called John here to do it, and he went down one weekend and done it. So that's where we're at on that. nothing really that we can do. But I just wanted to bring it up because it's been such a nuisance with it. And that's been around 673 Shore Road, 681 Shore Road. And I guess the rest of what I got is to do with the trees, so when we do that with the tree warden part.
I asked Billy to hold off on the tree items until we get the tree warden's report. He's got some specific. Dan, do you have a question?
I wanted to make one comment. I think you want the Junior Yacht Club to paint the shelter on the wharf.
Yes.
I bring this comment from my wife, who's had experience with painting the wharf shelter in the past. Her suggestion is that you ask the student instructors to do so. The Junior Yacht Club members are very young, and my recollection is that there was a problem last time that was done with it being a real mess.
Okay.
I think that's what Gordon did.
That was the intention,
Okay.
when we said yacht club, but you're right, we should make sure that the notes reflect our intention.
Anything else, Bill?
No, I think that's it.
Yeah. Is there sufficient time now to, well, there's going to have to be at some point in this meeting to address the warrant for the annual meeting, which I believe every overseer now has. And as we've indicated, the dollar figures haven't changed at all. I think there was a tiny bit of, we cleaned up ABCs, made everything capitalized properly and all that sort of stuff. Judy, do you want to comment on this?
This is the warrant that will be published in our annual book. It says in the annual book that it has not yet been approved by you, but this is the warrant that will serve as our agenda for the annual meeting that our moderator, whoever that shall be, will walk through. And you'll recognize the format from your own participation in annual meetings. Article 1 is one that you're already familiar with. Article 2 is simply the President's report. Article 3, the Treasurer's report. Article 4 is the meat. That's the budget that we all approved at June 18th as a result of our workshop the day before. And you'll see that it anticipates the possible $25,000 from the town, but doesn't assume it. So it creates an alternative assessment in the event that the town doesn't approve it at its annual meeting. 2 articles that you have not seen on these before. One is Article 5, to approve the proposed amendments to the bylaws. That's what we spent the public meeting on today, and we will be coming back to that. But the final version of those is what will be presented to the villagers. Article 6 is to approve the proposed changes to the dog waste ordinance. The rest are all the articles that you are used to. Article 7 is what we call a tax anticipation note. It allows the village to borrow the amount sought to be raised for the next year in anticipation of those monies. We've never, well, Joe can maybe correct me, but I don't know of us ever having actually borrowed on this. But we are required to get approval from the villagers to do that if we need to. The $202,000 that you see there is because that's how much we intend to raise from our taxes. The treasurer is required to make a financial statement as to the impact of that potential borrowing, and that's what follows there, and that was prepared with the good work of Steve. I'm going fast because this is something that you've all seen before, at least in format, but please interrupt me if I'm going too fast. Article 8 is the, what do we do if the wharf washes away or if any of our infrastructure washes away. Over the years, we have grown this article both in terms of dollars. It started out back in the day at about $100,000. We put it up to $250,000. And over the years, it only addressed the wharf, then it addressed the wharf and the community hall. Now, we believe we have captured all of our infrastructure. If something happens in the middle of the winter, Lee's example earlier, what do we do to secure that property right away? We have the authority here to borrow up to $250,000 or to reach into reserves. We, again, not good, have never had to do this either. Treasurer's statement talks about that anticipated borrowing as well. The Article 9 allows us to, this is one that Steve did circulate to all of us. This is the one that allows us to roll over excess revenue and use it for projects, so we don't have to wait. And it's for all events that we anticipate spending money on. It allows us to tap reserves without waiting for an annual meeting. Article 10 is the right to charge interest on delinquent taxes. Every year somebody says, what is that amount? The reason we can't put it in the warrant is because it has to be the same rate set by the town, and the town sets theirs after. And every year you hear me say, don't worry about it, pay your taxes on time. But it is expensive. It's a high rate, it's a punitive rate of interest, so please pay your taxes on time. The Article 11, 12 are the elections. Article 13 is reports of committees, which are also published in the annual report. And then we have an adjournment. There's also a notice here that immediately at the end of the annual meeting, whoever is elected will come downstairs and be sworn in, and usually have to sign some banking issues. That meeting, Danny, this touches upon something you raised in your comments. That meeting is not a meeting at which we actually transact business. It's the swearing in, taking care of the banks. The actual organizational meeting is the one that occurs after that. Any questions? If so, ask them. If not, someone please move the acceptance of this, and then we will all have to sign it.
John, could I make one comment? Judy, just again for the overseers, is that Article 4 budget is the only article on the warrant that can be amended from the floor.
Tell them how.
Is it only down, or
No,
it can go up or down?
It can go up or down. And it's a bottom line budget, and you have it in there. I'm just taking this number, 234, and if for some reason somebody wanted to make a motion to increase that number or decrease it, it can be amended by the voters.
With a hand vote on the spot.
Well,
By any
a
of
vote.
The three
A vote.
methods. It can be
Okay.
a voice vote, a hand vote, or a written vote.
Got it.
But I was just making the point is that Article 5 and 6, the bylaw changes, cannot be amended from the floor, and Article 7 and 8, those numbers cannot be amended.
Historically, has this budget ever been amended from the floor?
Yes.
Yeah.
I need first, let's have a motion on these, and then we can have a discussion. Is there a motion to accept this warrant for the annual meeting?
So moved.
Wendy, second from Lee. Now, any discussion on this warrant? Hearing none, all in favor? It's unanimous, thank you. And now we need to sign a copy. Does it matter which one?
I started.
You started, it's going around, it's working its way around. Thank you. And we apologize again for not getting something soon. Report of the office manager.
There are actually a couple of community hall requests that I need to make you aware of and get your authorization or suggestions on. The first one is August 4th. Beverly Crowfoot is looking to utilize the hall.
Is there anything going on?
There is, but I have been told to keep it kind of hush-hush.
Yeah.
And you can see me after, that I can provide you with more details.
Does Beverly's request conflict with what?
No, there's no conflict, no.
So, what, she wants it during the day, at night? What do we need to know?
She's saying it's Friday.
It's a Friday.
It's a Friday, yes.
Whatever.
And she is going to be utilizing 6 tables as well, which would be returning on Sunday. She would be returning those on Sunday. So I'm gonna have to clarify with her as to if she's just needing a call on Friday or if she's needing a call 3 days. I think it's just Friday, but I'll double check on that.
Well, is this on behalf of the Historical Society?
No.
And we're not supposed to talk about this
Not
for
supposed to
various
talk about
reasons?
this.
Understood.
But to be clear, when we rent the hall, the people who are using the hall are not charged a separate rate for tables, correct? In the
Right,
hall, right.
right.
We clear on that?
Yes.
So,
It's just when they take them.
Right.
so I don't see an issue with that as long as the calendar matches and we don't have to take any motions because we're not waiving any fees at this
And you
time.
said there's no conflict with any other thing? Oh,
No.
okay, that's odd.
Fine, next then.
August 7th, there is a request to use the hall. It's a Monday from 7 to 9 p.m. And it says Scottish country dancing. So, and it's no conflicts as well.
And she's not asking to waive the fee either, that's Gail.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The only other thing there is Diane Helmke. Actually, her daughter is getting married in September, and she is asking if it would be okay if the bridal party was able to go down to the harbor and take pictures. Now, she is aware that if there's a bus to transport them, that the bus would need to drop them off and then leave and then return back and pick them up. But she's wanting to make sure that it's okay that they have pictures down in the harbor and I guess around the gazebo.
Is that Labor Day weekend?
That is Labor Day weekend, yes.
Judy?
She had 4:30 to 5:30 is what they were looking at.
On what day of the week, sorry?
It says September, they're getting married September 2nd.
2?
Huh?
September 2?
Yes.
She wanted to know who she was getting married to.
That's a Saturday, just saying. September 2nd, 2 is a Saturday, so make sure we're talking about the right day. Judy?
So the only issues here is, of course, it's a public space, so we don't charge and we don't regulate, except we do reinforce that public use cannot circumscribe anybody else's public use. So depending on where they are, people are customarily interested in wedding photos and respectful of wedding photos. But as long as she knows that we're not going to stop boats coming to the boat float or anything like that, then she can do it. Same things that you told Angela Cassidy's mother.
Okay.
Anyone else comments on this or questions?
Yes, very nice of her to ask, because I want the pictures.
Anything else, Amy?
There is going to be, since we're not going to be here until September, but this will be before the next meeting, but there will be, as far as office hours, from August 31st to the first week of September is going to be all nights. I have to actually cover for my regular because he's on vacation that week.
Actually, there will be a meeting on August 13th. We'll be down at the Drinkwater School, but we have now instituted a full overseers meeting in August.
Oh, okay.
So we are going to meet again.
I'm sorry, July, I said August, but July 31st or July 30th to the first work of August.
Yeah, okay,
So,
understood. Vicki?
I would just like, and I don't need names or circumstances, but just as sort of a liaison, and hopefully all this usage is beneficial and painless for everybody. Have you had any complaints from any of the people using it as far as, you know, trash, garbage things not being straight? We've tried to keep, I actually hosted an event and saw a few things where the Arts Committee can tighten things up. I mean, we've got the regulations, it's just how do we do it. Have you had any complaints from people using it?
I haven't heard from any, like, the dancing and the yoga and anything.
That's a no. Sorry.
No, and they just, come and they have their codes, they're able to get in.
So everybody's fine with the cleanliness and the bathroom condition? You haven't had any? Great, that's
Well,
wonderful.
we did have substantial complaints on the mice, and that's why it's so great that Billy promptly dealt with that.
Besides that.
But the issues we had the year of the centennial and that sort of confusion has
They like
minimized.
donuts.
The mice have complained about all the people in the building. Anything else,
But as
Amy?
far as the time for that week, I am gonna post it on the door, you know, as to.
And send Dan, please, an update.
Yep, yeah, it is gonna be all night for that 1 week.
Okay.
John, just, Amy mentioned something for the 7th. I just wanted to, whoever's using it on the 7th, make sure that it doesn't interfere with anything for the 8th.
Right.
Right. Well, it's an evening event on the 7th. What time do we start setting up on the 8th?
Usually noon.
Why did you use "we"?
All right, I'll be there. I'll set up.
Yeah, Gail talked to me about it, and she knows that she's got to clear out any evidence of her use at the end of her use, because we will be setting up.
Anything else?
Usually we get in there and try to clean before the annual meeting, because there's been some people that has asthma problems. Gotta make sure that the dust and stuff is really cleaned out.
Can I just make a comment, it's appropriate, I don't know time is of the essence, but the event I hosted was the maskers. I know we had a lot of discussion about the maskers. I just want to say they were highly attuned to the fact that they needed to keep the place neat and orderly afterwards. And they were really grateful, and they really appreciated the opportunity. There was standing room only. And so as the person there, you know, I really was just there to lock the door in the end. They did everything, and so the communication with the Arts Committee to these people, I just want to commend them, and also to the volunteers and committee members, because I got a list of things. So I just want to throw that in. I just think that's really good, and certainly good for the community.
Great.
So,
Thank you. John?
I should also point that Bill Cressy wrote a very complete sort of manual for how to open, how to close, how to do everything for our events.
Good. Good top
That's
notch.
good.
We're going to move to committee reports now, communications.
We had an email from Nancy Erickson regarding mowing in front of her property at, I think it's 45 George Street, which is for sale. And I wrote to her that that our mowing contract did not include that, and then it was customary for people who fronted on village property that had some lawn on village property to just do it themselves. There's been no response from her, and it looks like it was taken care of, so that was done.
Thank you.
I posted the fire ordinance on the village bulletin boards, and I contacted the 2 main rental agencies on the water and Bayside Cottage Rentals, as well as a couple of owners that I know who rent through VRBO. I certainly didn't get a complete list of individual owners who do their own renting, and I emailed all those parties and got a positive, got a response from On the Water that they are very cognizant of the fire issue, and they have been in contact with their renters about it. That doesn't necessarily mean that they can always control them. I posted the dog ordinance, and I posted the notice of today's meeting regarding the bylaws. So that's that. And if I need to post additional things, please let me know.
Thank you. Finance Committee?
Nothing to report.
Infrastructure Committee?
Yeah, I put together a brochure. I think I sent most of everybody a copy. The models of the seawall out there don't really tell the story. People are very interested, they see it, and, so I printed up a bunch of these. And I think I sent copies to everybody. And, you want one?
Sure.
And I was going to pass those around. I was going to pass these. This kind of tells a story of what we're doing and what, or at least what we think we're going to be doing. And what I'd like to do is get permission from the overseers to print up 100 of those, that's all. We can get 100 for $75, we'll get 200 for $100. We can get 500 for $250. I was thinking that the plan for the seawall, which is outlined in this brochure, is that we're going to, in next summer, have a series of informational meetings for the village people, villagers, not in which we're going to hopefully get the assistance of a consulting engineer to help us with various designs, the cost of those designs, the life of those designs, all the things you like to know when you go to make a decision about a seawall. And then in the 2018 annual meeting, to approve the expenses for doing a design, and then in the 2019 annual meeting to approve the expenses for building the seawall. So we'll be talking about doing the seawall either late 2019 or early 2020. If God and Mother Nature don't interfere. And anyways, that's what this brochure is attempting to cover. And to provide. I would like to perhaps send those out with the utility mailing in September. And I'd like to have those models and a bunch of these upstairs for the annual meeting, and maybe a bunch of handouts out here on the table.
So that would probably mandate more than the $100, I mean the 100, so just print, my view is print as many as you think is appropriate, it's all economical.
Well, sending out with the utility bill alone.
That's 350 or so.
Right.
And the annual meeting, you want,
60, 70.
so we're up to 400 or so, plus you want some sitting in the office here or sitting out there. Feels like it's a 500-ish number.
Yep.
Am I correct?
Is that something that I get Amy to do? To order the 200, the 500?
Who are these being printed by?
Whoever you want. I had those printed at Staples, they cost about $1.
When are you thinking of sending them in the utility?
September.
In September. Well, and see, and most of the discussion is going to take place in the summer. Is this something you want to do
Summer
twice?
2018.
Right, because by June, they're all going to have disposed of their leaflets. So, and I'm again, big on communication. Send them out in September, get the conversation started, remind them, so order 1,000. I mean,
And well, we mail in what, so we have to go to January and May, I think, of the utility mail.
Yeah, well.
May 2018 would be good if you really wanted to.
Well, you want a reminder in May is all I'm saying. The sooner the better, you want the conversation now, so we can plan for now and then plan for next year, because I'm sure there's a discount if you order 1,000.
So the intent is to have a public meetings, at least one, next year sufficiently far in advance of the annual meeting, so that at the annual meeting, people will be informed enough to make a decision to vote on funding for the next phase of the project. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I guess it sounds like the appropriation here is probably, if you're at the $1,000 level, they're $1 a piece at Staples, that they're going to be 20 to 50 cents probably if you're at 1,000 for double sided.
Probably $500 to 1,000.
So I guess we're at the level where we need a motion, I think, $500. Lee?
I move we appropriate $500 towards these.
Second?
Second.
Judy, any discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. So $500 appropriated and just coordinate with it, yes.
John?
I would go online and just quickly look and see, but yes.
Could I just ask Dick, what's his intention for discussion at this annual meeting?
Very little as far as that goes, other than what I just described as what is our plan for the future. We're not making decisions on the seawall on this we are doing is looking to, in the budget, we've asked to appropriate enough money for a consulting engineer for 2018.
Are you gonna put those up there before September?
I
August 8th?
expect they'll be up there for the annual meeting,
Okay.
along with a bunch of these brochures. And I'm also working on a post, maybe a poster size of this that we stick on the wall, you know, like these that John Woolsey made up for the diorama.
Okay.
And that
And
is
you'll
going as
discuss
well,
that
but
at the committee report? Yeah, okay.
I think so, yeah.
Further infrastructure issues?
Nope.
Safety committee.
Do you have a question, Vicki?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, do you want people's input on the design, on the aesthetics of it? I mean, you can have little voting boxes there or something. Just
When we
around.
went to Maple Street, we ended up with, there was a whole citizens group that got together and says, you guys did it wrong.
Right.
Do it this way, we don't care how much it costs. I want to avoid that. There was also a small group of people who said, we didn't even know this was happening. Well, that may be their fault, but I'm not going to take that criticism again. I'm going to try to tell people, you know, Vicky's going to get her hair done on Wednesday. I mean, if that's what the people want to know.
I was talking about, is this an appropriate time to get some input on the aesthetics? The aesthetics of this seems to be very big compared to the.
The aesthetics are big, the cost is big, the life is big, the impact. Now, what this brochure does is it indicates that the infrastructure committee has already made a fairly major decision. And that is, we're going to go back with a full wall seawall, as is where it is.
Oh, you've already made that decision.
That decision has been made. There are two levels of decision to be made.
Right, well then.
One is, do we do the historic riprap? Do we do a half wall like the side of the thing? Or do we go with a full wall? And the committee decided that we want to go with a full wall. So that's in this brochure. And then it comes down to the people, which of the full wall designs do they not accept?
Okay, so I would just say, the ones that you've eliminated, well, I guess you want to show them that you've already looked at it and eliminated it. I'm just trying to think of the process here.
Well, the process is every time we bring it up, somebody asks them.
Comes up with something different too.
We had three of them
right?
out there, two were hiding in under the counter, if you remember the last time.
Right.
And somebody said, well, what about the one with the...
I understand. I understand, and I understand your concerns. I'm just, I'm concerned, this.
Judy?
We had
Just somebody
discussed,
who's never seen me.
I think it was at the June meeting, that we talked about a type of straw vote for the design for the scale model. And I think it was Lee who said, and that might come back to bite us, because we don't want people making choices based on isn't that pretty until the $1 million price tag is attached to it.
So maybe because I wasn't here, right?
Ah, that's right. So I think we chose not to solicit straw votes.
Okay, that's what, I missed that conversation, thank you.
Yeah, I think that the key word in the brochure is we need your assistance in guiding the selection.
So, thank you.
That was a word I changed recently. I was making the decision previously. I got some nice input from John.
We in this meeting. Okay.
Safety committee.
All right, so I sent out the report in advance, but since we do have a lot of people here, I'll go through it in a little bit more detail. So we had a safety committee meeting on July 7th. Present were myself, Beanie Einstein, Jim Hilling, and Cressy. We do, Harry Rosenblum is part of the committee as well, and we do have room for one more person, so at some point we might want to discuss who to add to the safety committee. The safety committee had the two recommendations for the overseers. One was to revise the fire ordinance so that the fire rules are clear and easily enforceable. Talk a little bit about that later, as well as to update the landscaping around the basketball court to improve its safety. So first, we've already discussed a little bit the ongoing problem with beach fires. I did include in my report to the overseers a couple of pictures of a fire that was done by renters. People have talked to them repeatedly. They continue to have the fires, and in fact, they left a fairly large fire pit and area around it, which one of the neighbors dismantled after the renters left. So this is an ongoing problem. So we discussed that the problem of beach fires, that they're often danger because of the proximity to brush and structures. They do carry heavy fine, but as far as I can tell, that fine has not been assessed, and there's some question about how we would actually enforce it. Our rules are a little bit in conflict with the town of Northport, so again, I think that needs to be resolved. So, John, thank you for calling, the various rental agents and talking to people about it. Again, the safety committee would like to understand who could be fined. Is there a way that we could find rental agents or the owners of the tenants, have some of these, inappropriate fires. So Jim Hunting did take a sort of crack at looking at the current fire ordinance, suggesting revised wording, as well as highlighting some of the ambiguities. And so I don't know if that's something that the governance committee should take up going forward. So we talked about the lifeguard. Evan is back, as you know. He's 6 days a week. He's typically not doing Saturday. We occasionally have gotten him to swap one day with Saturday if we need that. We tried to fill in the Saturday position. We were not able to. So again, next year we hope to have 7 days a week coverage. Another topic that was delegated to the safety committee was the placement of the Angela Field Memorial Bench. The overseers listened to it before and approved a family member's request to have it put in the present position. Some of the basketball players would like to have it moved because they jump over the bushes to retrieve balls and feel that it could be dangerous. So we talked about this, and we felt that the problem could be solved, of course, by the basketball players walking around the bushes instead of jumping over them. And so what we recommend is that the overseers review the landscaping around the basketball court, updating the bushes on the south side of the court, as well as letting the bushes grow taller and perhaps augmenting them so that they're deeper on the north side of the court so that you cannot jump over them. So again, that's just a recommendation. The final thing, we talked about speeding. It's a problem all year round. It certainly is made worse by the absence of a police officer here in Bayside during the summer. We have asked for the Sheriff's Department to patrol the roads. The Sheriff's Department has been seen cruising down Bayside on a daily basis, and what we would like is to make sure that they're also patrolling and enforcing the speed limits on Bayside Road and Shore Road as well. And finally, we have been told that we should call 911 with an emergency, obviously, and also remind people to be prepared to give directions to the site of the emergency. There was recently confusion between Park Road and Park Street. Park Street is in Heights, Park Road was in Bayside, and so the ambulance and emergency vehicles did not go to the appropriate location. I think we do have to clarify that it's the Waldo County Sheriff that you call right now for fire ordinance implementation. And again, the recommendation is that fire ordinance really be reviewed.
So when just for those in the audience who aren't aware, that the governance committee realized that it had a lot on its plate as it started to review various issues, and one of the topics we'll bring up in the future, we'll address, is the fire ordinance along with the zoning ordinance. So we set aside some issues saying we'll get to these by the 2017 annual meeting. We'll address others after that. Was there a question here, Paul?
I have one or two questions regarding the cruiser. Did we get it registered? And if so, why isn't it being deployed?
We did, but nobody gave me directions to deploy it.
We determined not to deploy it at the prior meeting.
Well, the average speed on Shore Road is between 30 and 35 miles an hour. We need to do something to deter it.
Are you saying that's the average speed people are traveling?
Yeah.
Because that's the speed limit down there.
25.
We, at prior meeting, the overseers determined did not elect to move the vehicle around and leave it in various places.
Did you vote on that, John?
It was a decision made not to.
I don't remember
I don't
remember having voted on that.
Let me go back and look at my notes. My recollection was we did, because it requires $1,200, $1,500 worth of repairs.
Well, it needed some other repairs, yeah.
So rather than spend that money for a vehicle, it was just gonna be parked around.
Right.
The overseers voted not to do that. That's my
I
recollection.
don't
Not
know if there was a vote on
in
that.
the
Yeah, but we voted to
I think
register.
I
Yes,
think
we
there
had to
was
retain the
also other
license plate.
costs involved. In order to move it, we had to put plates on it, we had to register it, we had to, there were other costs involved just to move it around.
Judy?
Well, I don't think that, we did approve purchase of those portable signs, right?
Yes.
So I guess I was wondering what was happening on that.
Those shouldn't be here any day. I was hoping they'd be here before the day. The salesman, as soon as they come in, will contact me and come down and show us how to do it, how to set them up, and how to set it up. And the cost was, I believe, $2,400 or $2,300.
For 2 signs, for 1 sign.
That's more than,
That's a lot more
To
than.
back up, Judy, that was, in order to buy that sign, that speed trap sign, we did spend the money on the cruiser. That was the difference.
My memory.
That does seem like a significant number more than we had.
No, so I'm reading the minutes and it was up to $2,500.
Okay, thank you.
well, that would have given us a surplus if we repaired the cruiser.
The determination was at the last meeting to use the money towards the purchase of the signs.
We chose to do that on the minutes that were just approved.
I know, not a bad decision.
Steve?
Bill, when you get a final number, if you could send that my way, I'd appreciate it. And just from a financial standpoint, there's currently sitting in the police budget $4,600 more that is dedicated to officers and expenses and what have you. Does the safety committee want to do something with that toward traffic calming?
Yeah, so the safety committee continues to make recommendations in terms of what we should be doing with traffic calming. And in fact, buying the speed sign was not our first recommendation. Our first recommendation was actually painting lines on the side of the road because if anything that you can do from a traffic calming standpoint that makes the road look narrower, actually gets people to slow down. So the 2 top recommendations from the safety committee have been to put reduced speed signs appropriately before the village, because right now, if you know, any of us who are coming into the village, you are actually into the village when when you get the 25 and the 15 mile an hour. So we thought that at least in front of maybe the golf course on Bayside Road, and then I don't know where it would be in the other direction coming into the village, that it would warn people that you need to reduce the speed. I believe that there are standard speed signs, standard, traffic signs. I believe Paul had talked to the town of Northport about this back in the fall, and that the town of Northport is fine with us, putting these signs in, and we would just have to pay for the cost of doing it. And I think Bill, as a village agent, could just arrange for those to be done.
Well, so from my standpoint, I can hold these funds aside. I believe if you want to use these funds, you have to have a motion for the overseers to do certain things, and I don't have any idea where we are on that.
Yeah,
just,
so the second, just let me go for the second one, and the second one, I thought we needed to have just a little bit more discussion on it, was the painting white lines on both Bayside Road as well as George Street through the village. My concern there is that it will change the look of going through the main part of the village. Now, we already have bright, tarred roads that are going through, so maybe it doesn't matter so much.
John?
So,
Is there a price on the painting?
I think, Bill, we looked at it,
I never looked at what price would be.
yeah, so I recall, I think in the minutes we had something about it, but it's the cost of the paint and the labor associated with it, so.
Paul?
I think you have to get DOT approval.
I believe, again, in the fall, I'd have to go back to
To
the
get
minutes.
town and DOT approval.
I think in the fall, we started down that process.
Joe?
Well, it was covered that the speeds on the streets are governed by the DOT.
Right.
I went through this a number
number of years.
Right, so we're not suggesting that we change the speed limit. So I guess I make a motion that we look into the cost of both painting the white lines on Bayside Road and George Street and Shore Road, as well as the two reduced speed signs, you know, one for in each direction coming into the village. Ask the village agent to see what the cost of that is and come back to us in August. And
I don't think you need a motion for that, that's part of your function.
Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
Might I suggest you call it bike lanes rather than white lines?
Okay.
Bike
Then you
lanes
have to
is
give
a-
3 feet.
Well, yeah, you still get into the side of the road.
Judy?
I do think it's appropriate to make a motion, and I'm happy to second it, and I would recommend that you say, and if those costs are less than 500, he be authorized to proceed in accordance with his pre-existing authority.
Okay. So,
I doubt that it's gonna, at least the signs themselves might be less than 500.
so I would like a motion for each one of those, because I think
Give
if,
these two separate.
yeah, two
things.
separate, and if they each come in under $500, then we just go ahead and do it. So I guess the first one is, I make a motion that we put reduced speed limit signs, 2 of them, one on each side of the village, and if it's less than $500, we just go ahead and do it.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Could I ask exactly what do those signs say? Do they say reduce speed ahead or something that, okay.
They're standard traffic.
Yeah, okay.
Just standard, you see it all the time.
And Wendy, approval of those signs does not require the DOT intervention?
I think Bill will have to work with the town of Northport and with the DOT to make sure that they're appropriate.
I think the town give us approval to put the reduced signs up.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
But I'll have to check, make sure.
So the proposal is 2 reduced speed signs, one at each end of the village indicating reduced speed ahead. And if it comes in after village research at 500 or less, that he's authorized to proceed and implement them. All in favor? That's unanimous, thank you. Your next
So
motion?
the next motion is to paint white sidelines on Bayside Road, George Street, and Shore Road within the village boundaries. And if the cost is less than $500 for Bill to be allowed to go ahead and contract for that.
Well, I have to get approval ahead of time from the town.
Yeah.
Right, and they make, whatever the approvals are.
Yeah,
Is there a second?
Second.
Judy, any discussion on that? Paul?
It's going to take a long time to get DOT approval.
I think it's.
We can't just do it.
No, so the motion is to go through the formal process to do it correctly.
Well, that should be part of the motion.
I think I
you
said
said
that.
The process is to
Subject to-
investigate, and if it's approved, to spend up to $500. Any further discussion? Steve?
I just wonder if 500 is enough. I have no idea whatsoever, but we have enough money to do it. If it was, I mean, I don't know what kind of
Well-
number the overseers are comfortable with.
The way I understand the motion, it's, that it anticipates if it's under 500, we get the process underway. If it's over 500, he reports, and then we will authorize over that.
because we could get an estimate for the striping and the paint before anything. I'm sure we're not doing nothing, we're just getting a price.
Right, exactly.
Good.
And if it's under 500, you will work to see what the next step in that process is, and go. If it's over, you'll tell us.
From a
Be
planning
significantly
standpoint, I'll hold all
over.
those funds aside.
It'd be significantly over, that's a long distance.
Yeah, I think it will be too.
To the sidelines and.
But at least it's getting the
Start the
process.
process.
Yeah, I just want to say, yeah, and again, you know, all due respects, that, you know, there are all sorts of things that are talked about to reducing speed. So, yeah, anything more, we need a discussion as to whether this is the way we want to go in lieu of other options. So, that's what I'm saying. It's not guaranteed. There is no guarantee that we spend $20,000 for painting and everybody's going to slow down. So.
Just jump significantly, I see 500 to 20,000.
Never worked in the state.
Further discussion on the overseers? All in favor? Vicky? Oh, sorry, that's unanimous. Anything else from the safety committee?
No, so I guess the final thing is the recommendation to invest in landscaping around the basketball court. So I don't know if that's something that Bill can just look into and report back to us.
Well, we have is that what you'd like to talk about, painting?
Well, I was totally off the subject, just that we're going to need to purchase new pads for the AED and batteries, so it's going to be about a couple $100. Just want to throw that in.
All right, clear.
But also the landscaping too as well.
Well, I'm not prepared yet to make a recommendation on the landscaping, if that's okay. I have to walk down there. So.
But the defibrillator piece, is that something that we can just authorize Billy to purchase? It's under $500.
Yeah, I can do it.
So Bill.
I already got it on the card on the AED site, which we can, I'll give it to Billy.
Paul, do you have a question?
Apparently, there's no plan for the basketball court in terms of landscaping or improving the safety there. I noticed the ball comes over onto the road quite a bit.
So that was the recommendation, is
That's
to look at the landscaping and improve the safety associated.
To develop a plan.
Right.
Yeah. There were bushes in front of the south side of the court. There were, bushes there originally.
And who's going to develop the plan?
I assume Bill would.
We'll look at it and see what.
Just because we'd like to replace something there on that side of the court, because the kids are
You
running
can't
the street.
legislate stupidity.
Huh?
You can't legislate stupidity. If they're jumping over the bushes.
Oh, that she's talking about the south
I'm
side.
talking about the south side.
Her side.
So,
My
so
side, where the kids.
it just seems that it's time to, some of the landscaping is not taken the way that it should have. Some of the bushes are not growing the way that they maybe could have to. So it's just time to revisit it. It seemed that Bill would be the appropriate person to look into that, and then come back with maybe a recommendation to either the overseers or the safety committee.
Town liaison?
There's only one minor issue that keeps cropping up, and that's the bridge, fissures in the bridge footing. The town council is pursuing different...
You mean down at Kelly's Cove?
Yeah.
No, further.
No, Saturday Cove.
Saturday Cove,
It's
right.
not in the village.
Not in
Right,
the
right,
village.
Right. But nonetheless, it's information that I think is pertinent. He's pursuing different legal avenues to see what the town can do to correct the error. The other thing that comes to mind for me as an overseer is I don't mind supplying names of contractors, but I can't necessarily qualify them. I don't, I think the more names we get to do things like painting and so forth, I think the better our options are, better pricing and so forth. But I think we should have a policy where the village agent at least gets 3 standard references. It's a standard practice. I don't know why we're not doing it, but I'll continue to supply names, but I cannot be responsible for qualifying them. And I strongly urge that we get 3 references for each contract that's awarded. And that's my report.
Thank you. Utility committee?
Well, should I make a motion on that? I'm just surprised that we don't check references.
Bill, what's your take on this? You're the one who had me doing it.
Hard enough to get one.
But
It's a difficult process. That's all I would say.
yeah,
Judy?
we have a process. On contracts over a certain amount, we require our village agent to solicit 3 bids. That is already in place. Billy has reported time and time again that when he does approach people, often people that Paul, because of his contract experience, said, hey, bring this guy, he may not know about it. Billy has reported to us time and time again, those people don't give us estimates. So the process is try to get 3 estimates. This most recent one that we did in the spring when we awarded this contract to Siren of Grant Lippman was specifically as a result of you're trying to get 3 and getting only 1. We approved that contract and then we looked at it and the the bid, and then we kept looking and looking and looking at it. So I don't think we need a motion to approve it. We already have that policy.
The issue, Paul's discussing about references, not about.
Right, well, but one of the things that he has done when he tries to get these people is he then checks them out. So we already have the policy.
Checks them out, what does that mean?
He relies upon his expertise in the community and knowledge and his own instincts, and then reports to us. And then we ask questions, and if we're satisfied, we make a motion, and if we're not, we tell them to go.
Why would it be difficult to get 3 references if the person's been in business for any length of time?
No, it's
They
not
should
a matter
be eager to give 3 references.
It's not a matter of getting 3 references, it's a matter of getting 3 bids, 3 people interested in the process. That's the policy we
Well, it's
have.
2 different things. That's 2 different things, Judy.
All right, I think, Paul, if you want to make a motion on this right now, that we require 3 references for every bid above a certain amount, then you can make that motion, and we can determine that.
Well, I don't think it should be formalized that way. I just think we should, as a matter of practice, try to get 3 references on somebody that we're closing in on, that we want to hire, but just as a precaution, to make sure that it's somebody that we're solid on. That's all. I just think that should be a policy.
Okay, got it. Utility committee?
Utility committee met on Friday. The plant is operating great. We have no action items to present to you, other than this. We got the report back on the hydrant. As Dick McElhaney intuited, the pressures per square inch certainly will sustain at least 1 hydrant. We, after much discussion, decided to recommend to you, well, the utility committee is going to install a hydrant linked to the Belfast Water Department at the top of Ruggles Park.
Can we see that?
Yeah, where's?
I'd like to know where it's going.
It's the corner of Park Road and Broadway.
Park Road and Broadway?
Yeah. There is already a stub there. We believe we're going to hire Dean Brown to do the work. We'll have to talk with the town because we have to dig up the pavement. We don't think there'll be any issue there. Of course, most of the hydrant is not in the middle of the road, so we don't think we'll have an issue, but we do need to talk with them about it. So we're going to be proceeding with that. You'll recall that the budget that you approved anticipates the village paying rent for that. So you're going to get a hydrant that you're going to be paying rent for. We learned a couple other things, and one was that because the pressure per the PSI was so strong that we are going to investigate whether we are going to disconnect the existing hydrants fully from the fire pond and connect them each to the Belfast water supply. We haven't made a decision as to that yet. We'll be reporting back to you. We also will be looking at, maybe for the year 2019, another hydrant going further down the shore road, because if we can do both the essentially disconnecting the fire pond and relying upon Belfast Water District for our fire protection, then we would then have the capacity to add to the existing stubs something else. So,
Do you have an approximate location on Shore Road?
there's an existing stub, and I'm not quite sure where it is. It's down Kelly Cove-ish, right? Yeah.
There's Kelly Cove, one at the end, down near the end.
So that's something that we would, sorry to interrupt, but we would look into that and we would have that discussion.
You'd want it where the highest density is.
Yeah, exactly. And we would have that discussion at the utilities.
We don't need it really down in Kelly Cove. It's closer to the village.
We would have that discussion at the utilities meeting, and the utilities meetings are public meetings, so.
Judy, what's the schedule for the Ruggles Park hydrant?
We don't have a schedule for it yet. We have to order the cast iron hydrant, and we have to talk to Dean Brown.
Okay.
So, but by the time you start paying the rent for it, the village, it will be in.
Okay. Good. Anything else on the utility committee?
There's no other action items.
Governance committee.
Ah, that's me.
That's you again. And,
Okay, so governance committee, what I would recommend that we do is now that the public comments are over, I think you all have Dan's written comments. And I think that it would be useful to go through the bylaws and incorporate what we feel we should be incorporating. That's the right way?
And are you proposing a voice vote on each one of these 13 changes?
Yeah, or discussion as to whether changes need to be
Got
made.
it.
Because he hasn't actually, he's asked questions as to about 9, not changes.
Go ahead.
So the first suggestion that he made, and I think Penny has voiced this comment as well, is should the preamble be the place to put the voter registration requirements? And I don't see any reason not to do that. It's not part of the bylaws, but it is a good place to remind that. So do other people have a problem with the preamble, the introductory comments, including the voter registration comments?
Do it.
I'll do that. Okay. So the second one he made was that he was confused, and I hope you don't mind that I'm doing it. There were many community members who had questions about the bylaws. I think this is a good organizational tool. I'm not giving dominance to Dan's comments. I just think it's helpful to do it this way. Okay. So the second question that was that he was concerned about committee formation, and if that's at that initial meeting, have we taken, the one that's right after the annual meeting, have we taken the pulse of the public as to who wants to serve? I think we answered that. We do that at our orientation meeting or organizational meeting in any event, not on August 8th. And as Wendy just noted, we will bring people into committees who express either that they don't like the work we're doing or that they want to help with the work anytime. So I don't think that paragraph 2 requires any changes, my personal view. Paragraph, any questions?
I'm not quite sure where you are.
Oh, well, you know what?
I've got Danny's notes.
Here you go. They're numbered. Somebody had translated them into a numbered document. Does that help?
Same thing.
But just with numbers in front of it. Does that help? Is everyone working off this?
Yeah.
Okay. I know, well, I guess it was handed out this morning.
You didn't get a copy of it either.
Yeah, here you go. There's a pile of them right here. Number 3, Dan's looking for consistency. Crazy. Should we say, and too bad,
Wait a minute, on question 2, does the president have the sole authority to appoint members?
no, and I don't read it as it saying that.
What's the language currently, Judy?
The language says,
President shall appoint members.
with the advice and counsel of the members.
But yeah.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have, shall appoint the members of such standing and ad hoc committees as advised and recommended. He shall do what is advised and recommended.
Which has been the case. Take you okay with that?
No. If the president decides he will not take our advice, that person doesn't get.
No, shall means must in legislative documents. The overseers tell him who to appoint, he shall appoint them.
Okay. So it's an overseer decision.
Yeah. If you think of the president as the chief executive officer, he does what the, yes, and he doesn't vote, and he doesn't direct.
Highly paid.
Yes,
At
that's
least
why he
there's
gets
that.
the big dollar, yeah.
Isn't there somewhere else that it says the president appoints the chair?
We changed, yes, we say that the president appoints the chairman. With the, and it also says with
It
the
used to
advice.
be the committee voted the chair.
Right, but now it's with the advice and recommendation.
So the overseers appoint the members and the chair of the committee.
President of the village, now you're on page 4. President of the village, consistent with the advice and recommendation of the Board of Overseers, shall appoint from the board such chairpersons of such committees as are deemed necessary. So the president appoints, he has to do it consistent with the recommendation, and each committee chair has to be an overseer.
Is
So,
everybody comfortable with that?
What part aren't you comfortable with?
Chairman must be an overseer.
Yeah.
If that's in the charter.
Well, David Crowfoot has done an excellent job as a non-overseer and chairman of the Utilities Committee for a number of years. I would hate to tell him that he's no longer a persona non grata.
But that's not the utility committee. The utility committee has its own ordinance that directs that. So the utility committee is not part of that.
I'm just saying, you're not casting a very wide net in asking for it to be the 7 musketeers.
Well, when we discussed it and you approved it, we discussed that it was useful to have a chairperson who was also an overseer so that we would have actual physical presence here, people reporting the committee action.
Useful is different than must have.
Dick, as I recall, the discussion was, if there was a chairperson who was not an overseer, then there was no necessary requirement on them to be attendant at these meetings. And we might have committee reports without having the chair here. And by saying it has to be one of these 7 people, you're expecting that the committee chair is going to be here to report.
So just a question, does each committee have to have a chair? Because I believe the safety committee at one point did not have a chair that was an overseer.
No, I think that Peter was always the safety committee chair. I mean, it's interesting because the safety committee is a perfect example of consensus-based decision-making, so it may feel as though it didn't have a chair, but Peter Allen was the chair, and then after that it was Steve Flowers,
And
who
he
was
left
not an
early, so it's just a
offender.
gap.
Right, but then you appointed someone to be.
Paul?
Why not have a non-member chair report to a designated overseer?
This feels like it's getting into the weeds for the bylaws, I've got to tell you.
Yeah, I think all we're asking for is a chain of responsibility. Each committee functions the way that they do, and I think they're pretty inclusive.
Right, and just to remind you all, before these were presented, they were voted and approved unanimously. And I really appreciate the comments, but I don't want us to undo what you did. There's always a chance to do it better next time.
I make a motion we don't undo the bylaws as it's in. Take them as they stand right now. Is there anything on this sheet that really needs to be approved one way or the other?
I'll jump to where I think that there are some helpful.
Let's finish this process.
Yeah, I think there's some consistency issues.
So number 3 was, should we use the word, we right now say income and disbursements and income and expenditures. We use both those, we use disbursement and expenditures. We want to make it uniform in the treasurer.
Yes.
And what is the word that you would choose? Disbursements or expenditure?
I recommend expenditure.
Disbursements is an accounting term.
I agree with expenditures.
Expenditures. So in the 4th line up from the bottom in treasurer, when you get the copies from me this week, it'll say expenditures in that paragraph instead of disbursements, okay? In the deputy treasurer section, he was curious about in the absence of the treasurer. I don't think we need to change that. I think we all understand in the same way as the chairman provision in the charter. It's when the person's not physically present to do the act necessary. Danny, to maybe help you, we've had, particularly in the context of a deputy clerk, if Beanie's in Key West, we need someone to put the seal on some bonding documents. And so it's that instance that we call Carlton.
Number 5.
Number 5, I answered that question about participating in the quorum. I don't think we need to change that at all. In the vacancy section, I made a point that that section is quoted from the charter. It is there for informational purposes, and we can't, since it's a quote, we can't change the language. He has suggested in paragraph 7, I'm jumping to C, that we add the word committee after communications for consistency's sake. I think that makes sense. He's asked questions, the same types of questions that Dick has asked here about, well, how do committees work? And I think, as Vicki has just said, we're getting in the weeds when we start down that path at this point.
Can I just return to his question about the requirement to publish agendas and minutes, 7D, on his notes, Dan's notes?
Yeah.
Do we want to make that a requirement of, yes, meetings, committee meetings are public, and their findings are public.
I don't think that my personal view is the bylaws don't have to say that because the law already says that. Like the utilities committee has an agenda, that's posted before the meeting. Safety committee does. I can't suggest that the finance committee, I have done a good job about that, but
I think it's a practice issue.
yeah.
I don't think
But
it's
the
a law.
expectation is that the communications committee and the town liaison, et cetera, publish their findings and their minutes
If they meet.
if they meet. Currently, there are committees that I've indicated that are one person. But they would have findings, I guess, or minutes, and they should be published or made available. And it's a matter of practice.
Which they may be by their verbal report, such as John giving a verbal report today that's recorded in the minutes.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if you need to have, I posted the fire notice on the bulletin board, taking the time to write up, I did this thing.
Just clarifying that. Thank you.
I think this, in the annual meeting section where Danny has recommended that we add not less than and not less than with regard to the publication. I think that that's wise.
I agree.
So I will add those. He also wants me to get the capitalization of annual meeting correct. And so I will make those changes. See paragraph 8, unless somebody says no. The registration of voters section shouldn't be, we're putting the eligibility requirements in the preamble, so I don't think we need to restate them. What do you all feel about number 10 in terms of protecting the lives or the property within the village?
I think that's a good.
Makes sense. Yeah. I'll do that. I also think that particularly in the situation that we have this year, that his recommendation that we add, if the overseers determine that appointing a police officer is appropriate, then we shall do so. It helps deflate the expectation that we will have one, because we can't always have one. So unless someone says that that's a terrible idea, I'm going to incorporate that. And I think that his correction, his clarification on 11B is also very helpful. That's the appointment was only going to be 1 year,
Why do we put a restriction on that?
so that the new board can make its own decisions.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a 3-year board.
No, it's going to be a new board duly constituted each
Right.
year.
The board changes every year. It's different makeup. 3-year appointments within it, but
I have an issue with that. The formula that's used to determine the length of terms for each overseer, I have a problem with a 2-year term. I'm not sure why you guys chose a 2-year term. I mean, it makes it that much longer and harder to get everybody in a 3-year cycle. So,
can we finish hold that.
all right.
Hold that, let's finish we're almost at the end of these.
All right.
On the War Faster section, he suggests, he has the sentence structure needs to be fixed. I've looked at it and I think he's right. I don't know if any of the rest of you have looked at it.
Hold on a second.
See his missing word there.
Yep. 12B, should the bylaws address compensation, ditto for the tree warden? Should we even refer to that, deal with that?
No.
Okay.
And those were all his comments. Now to come to Paul's comments. Again, on this is on the how we roll out the appointment. This was all voted unanimously here, but the rollout is going to be something that I think the nominating committee and the board will work with next year. If this is adopted this year, which we expect it would be, then we have a year to map out how we roll that out. So I think that we're okay. in dealing with the 1 year, 2 year, and 3 year.
And Judy, just as a clarification, I know we changed the wording based on my recommendation, but this is the simplest way to actually constitute the new overseers, the board where everybody will have 3-year terms.
Right.
And so we have to phase it in appropriately.
Right.
Why not follow the recommendation I made, where first year we elect 3 overseers and the officers to 3-year terms. The second year, everything else will be 1 year. The second year, we elect 2 overseers to 3-year terms. And the third year, we elect 2 overseers to 3-year term. And then we repeat the cycle in the 4th year. It's much less complicated. You don't lose time with 2-year terms. It's much simpler.
So what you're doing here is you're replacing some of those 1-year terms with 2-year terms, so you get some level of consistency.
Why bother? Why make it a 2-year term?
Well,
We're trying to get everybody into the 3-year thing. I think we're talking sort of apples and apples, just different flavors. You know, it accomplishes.
It's going to take longer to get into a 3-year term.
Okay.
Doesn't make sense.
Well, and I just come back to the fact that these were unanimously approved, subject to the public meeting.
And we did discuss them ad nauseum
John.
at our committee meetings, so.
Can I make one comment? As a member of the governance committee that has nothing to do, those changes don't affect me. They do affect Vicki, John, and Judy. And we had long discussions about the best way to do this, and this was the unanimous approval of the governance committee, and that was presented to the overseers. As Judy says, you still have a year to work it out, but that's a good plan, and it's been discussed.
The governance committee came up with a statement that said, in 2018, we will elect 3 overseers for 3 years. And that's it. So you had 3 overseers for 3 years, and then
That was an initial,
Right, that's
in
what.
the initial discussions.
And then Dick had, at the overseers pointed, through Dick's good comments, pointed out to us that we had addressed only 3 overseers.
Right.
And the 7. And so we worked together on June 18th and came up with the language with your language and Steve's chart. And then Wendy took that language and said, well, isn't it this? And everyone said, yeah, that makes sense.
We voted on it.
there are 2 different ways to get through that same cycle. It's a 3-year cycle. You can elect 3 overseers for 3 years and 4 overseers for 1 year apiece, which is what your suggestion was, what was my idea. And then the second year, you vote 2 overseers for 3 years and 2 overseers for 1 year. And then the third year, you elect 2 overseers for 3 years, and then you're into 3 years.
Repeat in the 4th year.
Yeah.
It's either that or elect everybody for 3 years.
No, because then you don't get the staggered terms.
Right, I
No,
understand.
but the other way is to elect 3 overseers for 3 years, first time, and then 2 overseers for 2 years, and 2 overseers for 1 year. And then you set that stagger up.
The bylaws that we voted on at our prior meeting were unanimously voted on by this board. Today, we are hearing public comments and additional changes. So unless you want to make a proposal in motion to revisit our discussion of what we already voted on unanimously, I believe that we are here to consider the public comments today.
I don't know if it's appropriate, I move we leave it alone.
Can I finish?
Wendy.
So, in the instance where if you do 1 year terms, you vote for the same person 2 years in a row, basically we are doing the same thing that Paul is recommending. And I can map it out for you.
How is it the same?
Because it basically.
In the 3 years, you end up with the same.
You have the same thing. And I can explain it to you after the meeting, but
No, I think I see.
it's exactly the same. And so what we did, it's only simplified language that gets us quickly to the place that we want to be.
Because my language is this, and Wendy's language is this.
Agreed.
And again, it's exactly the same with what you're proposing. And again, with the assumption that many of us repeat a term.
A question from Mr. Huntsman?
No, just a comment that historically, when boards like this are set up, the system you're using is always used.
Okay.
Dan?
I agree with what Wendy just said and what Joe just said. My question is mechanically, have you thought about how this is going to work at the annual meeting?
Yes.
Because it seems very complicated.
No, it's not. We
Tim.
have figured it out.
Is the nominating committee going to suggest that certain overseers are for a 3-year term?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it's just for 2 years.
Yeah.
The bottom line is you want staggered terms, and the suggestion in here achieves that over a 3-year period.
Right.
And it will be, yeah, it'll be easy for whoever the moderator is.
Can I have a motion to accept the proposed changes to the bylaws?
So moved.
From Wendy, second. From John Woolsey. Any further discussion on the proposed changes as Judy has outlined them, and you've kept track of them, Judy, in your
Yes, I
document?
did, and
To
we'll
the bylaws.
have them this week. And when Amy will have them this week, and we will post them properly.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? I assume that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Anything else from the governance committee?
Well, yeah, there's a typo in the dog waste ordinance. It's bigger, the dog waste ordinance is this long, but Danny
I
pointed out
fixed
we had a
that,
typo.
that had been fixed at one point,
Get to
but I don't
It's the
think it ever
B,
got
the B
done.
divide, so we just must have given you an early draft.
It
so.
just never got, yeah, whoever sent that.
Okay, we're going to move on to the report of the tree warden. Yeah, sorry.
One thing, so I think a couple of people from the safety committee might want to meet with a couple of people from the governance committee so that we can talk about audits and things.
And what I would recommend on that, Wendy, is that, well, yes, so let's do that.
Let's figure out how to do it.
And
Fine.
we'll schedule that.
Report of the...
One quick question.
Go ahead.
Sure. Going back to the term allocations, the 3, 2, and 1 is essentially for the first year, after which it goes into a 3-year rotation, right?
So after the first year, we are in the 3-year rotation,
Okay.
right? So it would be like it's today and everybody already has 3-year rotations. Some people would be up for election and other people would. So the way that we have outlined it, the first year we do it, we are already into the 3-year rotation and everything just runs the way that the bylaws. So it's very simple.
Okay.
Says the engineer.
Report of the tree warden, he said. I think there's copies of this running around. Do people need them out there? This was sent to me as a document, as I said, on July 12th, and there were not numbers attached to it by your house, but subsequent to this, she has communicated with Bill, who can attach some numbers, I believe some dollar figures, from Benner's Tree Service to this. So basically, her report, Jane's, discusses the large ash in Ruggles Park, which is not the one with the bench, but the one closer to the road, which from any angle you look at it, you can clearly see is in distress. And I had a personal conversation with her sitting there looking at the tree. She gave me much more detail on this, but essentially, you can keep it and play with it every year to try and keep it alive, and he thinks it's 4 or 5 years in it, or you take it down now and you start over with a new tree. That's the story there. The second issue is the flowering cherry near the yacht club, and we heard, and basically the feeling there is everybody agrees, thin out the tree, it's perfectly fine. The wire issue may be a separate issue in terms of anchoring it better. She says an additional large oak in Bayview Park, some dead limbs, and finally, of course, there's the auditorium park issue, which has come up subsequent to this. But Bill, can you apply some numbers to what she has here?
Right. So what I have here, to take down the ash tree in Ruggles Park, chip the brush, haul the wood off, $800. Plant tree, he'll charge $300 plus cost of tree that you're going to put back in. Or prune ash at $500 to $600.
Oh, you had an elevated, it sounded like you were still
halfway
talking.
through. Got it, prune it, got it.
Okay, do we do these as individual votes?
No, let's just hear all the numbers first.
Okay, and then the the massive oak tree in Bayview Park, to get the dead wood out of there is $1,200.
And that would be a pruning.
That would be prudent, yes.
And what about the cherry tree at the yacht club?
He did not get a price back to her yet, and she did not, in her thing, no price for cherry tree, but I didn't want to push it too hard right yet.
Okay.
So finally, there's some work in the Cradle Park, which was scheduled but not completed last year, so
Yeah, and I can't remember where,
so we approved it, there was a price associated with it, and it just didn't get done.
this didn't get done yet.
But we'll need to roll over and have a new vote on that because that authorization expired with that budget.
So we'll have to check on that, but that's, hopefully she's gonna be on that, I hope.
Well, we,
First of all, well, I don't know if we can, but
So that
we can have a discussion, an open discussion on this first.
Yeah.
Beanie, did you want to say something?
Just, so Jane is saying that she's not gonna get a price for the cherry tree?
No, she is, but she's on vacation, she's gone away,
Okay.
and she just didn't have the time to get back and push Nate for a price to do the cherry tree yet.
Oh, okay.
She is gonna get a
That's on her
price.
agenda.
Yes, it's on the agenda. She just didn't get the price.
we have some letters about a serious incident in Auditorium Park. We don't have prices on that, but I think we need to address it. Billy came to my house and told me his observations on the trees, and it's not just that one tree, but there are, if you look up, there's dead up at the top on several of these trees. They look as though they are pruning issues and not clear out the tree issues. So
That's,
Let me add to
I've
that.
had a contrary conversation with Mark Brockway, who says that when it rains, the water literally comes out the bottom of several of these trees, that they are rotten inside, and that she believes, and that there are other residents there, evidently, who believe that the large tree from which the branch came down should be taken down, and that there needs to be some sort of comprehensive look at the trees in Auditorium Park.
but we need to have that action taken immediately.
I agree.
That's where I was going.
So could we have a tree person actually come in and look in these areas and make a recommendation instead of us guessing?
Better. So,
Right.
right, so I wanted to just say I want somebody to get on that right away, and although my next motions will be to authorize these other things, I don't want Auditorium Park to get to the bottom of the list. I want the list going coincidentally.
Yeah, and I don't think we can wait until next meeting to authorize something for Auditorium Park, given the seriousness of what's going on and people's concern. I'd like that to be we can authorize whatever we want here, but that be on the top of the list as far as
Okay, yeah,
treatment.
Jane Strauss's email. I'll be back Sunday, here's the estimates from Nathaniel, and that's what I just give you for those estimates. It sounds like we need to add another $1,000 for Auditorium Park. Now, I think that's just off the top of my head, and I think that's just for pruning.
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, if we're talking about betters seeing the same observations that Marge Brockway has seen and making a recommendation that we need to be taking some of those trees out, remember that our mandate is that we also replace. Each tree costs us $500 and then $500 to dig the hole. So we're talking about a substantial amount of money in Auditorium Park, but we have to do it.
Paul?
I like Wendy's idea about doing a survey of our trees and taking recommendations.
I'll talk more specifically about that, and I think it's a very good idea. But am I hearing, I think you need to get to Benner
Before she does.
now, and just have them come look at Auditorium Park, get back to you the recommendation, so that we can start this process moving real fast.
Maybe would buy us a little time if we got somebody to trim the ones in Auditorium Park first, and then do like Wendy says, do a survey of all what we need to do afterwards.
Yeah, even
Since
getting
we
the
won't-
prune, these things are so tall that it's gonna have to be a licensed arborist anyways, who's climbing the trees, so it's gonna cost money anyways. But betters, we can get betters out there right away to tell us what to do. That's key, I think. And one reason this forest is a forest that was planted at the exact same time, around the village, around the campground meeting association. So it's all aging at the exact same time. And Auditorium Park in particular is suffering from the use of a park as a parking lot. Compaction of the roots is damaging trees at an accelerated rate. So when we replant the trees, we need a parking plan. Those people don't have parking for their houses, then we have to accommodate that. We have to take that into consideration. But when I don't want to invest $550 in a new tree, $550 to dig the hole, only to see a car parked on its root ball.
Right.
So we'll need to define parking spaces as part of this.
Julie, let me ask you a question. Does that ordinance say the tree has to be put in the same place?
Same,
That was my question.
Same approximate location. That was the debate we had about the mulberry tree in Bayview Park that went on for months and months and months.
Okay, I didn't remember.
Says same approximate location.
So that implies that we need parking over in the park that's appropriate so that there isn't additional damage done to the trees. So there's another cost we have to anticipate.
Right. So now I would like to make a motion that banners be hired to thin out the cherry tree
Second. What's that?
Thin out the cherry tree,
near the yacht club.
which does not have a price associated with it here so far. And to be honest, that's a relatively aesthetic issue
That's minor
compared to the other things we're discussing here. The other things we're discussing are about trees need to be taken down and branches falling, and it would really be great to thin out the tree. We're starting with something, and we don't have a price.
Yeah, well, if it's less than 500, I say it's within his discretion. If it's more, he'll come back to us.
It may be that
I thought it was, that tree could only be done certain times of the year.
Michael?
He said it could be done any time of the year.
Yeah, thank you. Jane had reported that because it's a fruit tree that perhaps it's the advice was, but the arborist says otherwise.
So,
Wendy,
is the motion on the floor? Did you have a second?
there's no second
I
yet.
don't have a second.
I thought Lee seconded it.
I'm sorry, who?
I thought Lee seconded it.
Oh, you did, sorry.
Oh,
Okay, so we're.
Now we're in discussion on to thin out the tree.
So, I'm wondering if we can do this in a way that we're not micromanaging. I mean, we know that this stuff has to be done, so I guess if we, do approvals for each one, that's fine, but it seems that we have the village agent as well as an arborist who knows what they're going to do, and that issue really is the total amount that we want to spend on this, is that right?
Right. So
And I looked through the budget, and it's unfortunate that Steve's not here, because I wasn't sure what we had set aside each year to actually take care of the trees, so what was
only $2,000.
It's 2,000 this year. I asked Steve to raise it another 1,000 for next year, and I think you guys.
We approved that. So we're three.
So 3,000 next year.
And have we used the 2,000?
I think we have used some of the money this year. I don't know what the figure is, because if you remember, we had to do the Williams tree on Shore Road. So we've taken some money out of that.
We've spent $316.75.
So all total, we have $5,000 in this fiscal year budget and next fiscal year budget in terms of doing the trees. So I guess a friendly amendment to Judy's motion is to approve tree work that's within the budget based on these guidelines.
I would accept that. What I tell you what I was going to do the cherry tree. If it's less than 5, he can do it. If it's more, tell us. Do the other 2, the ash tree, which is take it down, which for only $800 as opposed to prune it and baby it along for 2 or 3 more years.
800 plus the cost of replacement.
Right.
That's going to happen soon.
I was about to say that, so that $800 take it down. Always remember that there's another at least $1,000 expense to every tree we take down. So that's $1,800 right there. Then I was going to make the motion as to the one on Bayview Park. Bayview Park. Those are the ones, we have 3 constructive problems on. We don't have numbers on better, but we have an action item, on Auditorium Park, but we have an action item on it. So either way, as long as we get, because a motion that simply says, do what the budget allows us to do, doesn't give Jane or Bill the direction as to where you do what when. So this is, do it. Do the ash tree, do the oak tree, and do the cherry tree. Do everything we can to find out what we need for Auditorium Park. That's my goal. Write the motion to make that happen.
So I think, and then we also need the Cradle Park.
Paul?
I was over at Auditorium Park yesterday with this young fellow over here, and I noticed people parking right next to the tree. Shouldn't we advise them to park around the perimeter? Can we do that?
That's another issue. Right now, let's deal with, this is the non-auditorium.
I'm going to withdraw my
part.
motion and let someone else, now that you know what I want to do, if someone can say it better.
So if the cherry tree costs more than $500, are we really not going to do anything with it?
No, then it'll come back to us in August with
But
what
do
the
we
amount
care?
is.
I mean, why do we care?
Because we do need a vote on spending money higher than 500 until we change
But
that
if we
limit.
do a motion that includes it in, so that we do the cherry tree, the ash,
Okay,
and the Bayview Park,
so motion on those trees.
on those trees, as well as investigating Auditorium Park.
Okay, make that motion.
Public question, yes?
I'm sorry, just a question about how do you prioritize all these trees, though? I mean, I feel like from what I was hearing, the Auditorium Park seems to be quite a safety issue, more than just an aesthetic tree issue. And there's all these items that are going on, and you're putting the guidelines, but how are you prioritizing them?
Vicki?
That's my feeling also, and who's to say that the next rainstorm, a tree doesn't fall down, near somebody else's kids, and that becomes a priority. We've been waiting months for some action with these trees, which brings me to other issues. But I think Auditorium Park is the issue. The others need to be done, and currently are aesthetic, and this is the first time we're getting any information that we can use. I would like to make a motion that we authorize Bill to go ahead, find out what the appropriate treatment is for the Auditorium Park, and proceed with it. And we table the rest of these things until we have an overview of what needs to be done in a more, less of a rushed situation.
And
So I think it's really a dollar amount. And so I think that we need to understand what the overseers want to spend this year. I know what we have in the budget, but as Steve continues to remind us, we do have some discretionary money that we could spend. We have chosen to date to spend it on the community hall. We could choose to spend it on trees. I think if we can give Bill a prioritized list and the right budget, that he could just get all of this done, and instead of us talking about it at each meeting. And that, I would like to do a motion that basically has that.
I'll second that motion.
Well,
If that-
sorry, there was no motion there.
No, but I think, I'll make a motion, but I need to know what the board feels is a reasonable amount. Are we really not going to do anything?
Well,
I'd like to go back to Judy's idea of proceeding with the work that Bill has already done in getting proposals to address the trees that need to be addressed most urgently. I'd say let's just do it. Let's get it done and take a survey, find out what it's going to cost to get a survey about trees, and then start making decisions after that.
I think we need to move on Auditorium Park and actually get some trees cut. I think that motion, whatever it's going to be, should have some $5,000 limit on Auditorium Park or something like that. Just go ahead. We've got discretionary money we're talking about using on the community hall.
We have money to go up
right.
several thousand.
How about, I don't think $5,000 is going to do it at Auditorium Park. I think you're talking about $7,500 at least. I think we also have a known, the notion that one tree fell doesn't mean the one that has been identified, the ash tree, is not going to fall. And so they are changing priorities. I think we need to address them all. We have concrete information on.
Yeah.
I can
Let's
accept
just do
that
it.
the cherry tree only because we've been talking about it. So I'll take that off the list. The ash tree, the baby park tree, and auditorium park, up to $7,500 would be my request. Because I think that each of them are presenting emergency spending needs.
Yeah.
Include, to take them down and replace. So,
Yeah, I'm just wondering if 7,500 is going to be enough.
it's probably not.
So I
But in August, we can come back. It's
All
not
right,
gonna be
so,
done tomorrow.
right, so, okay, yes. I would have said 10,000, but I think 75 is fine.
But we're talking 2,300 plus the cherry tree currently, so why are we jumping to 7,500?
Because auditorium park.
Which is an emergency situation.
Yeah, but we've addressed that with $1,000 to $1,200.
I think if you take the cherry tree off,
Right,
I think probably up to 10,000.
okay. It's-
What?
You spend, I spend.
I
How do we, where does that
I
come
mean,
from?
let me put it this way. If we get a windstorm and a limb comes down and it hits somebody, what will we have to spend to defend ourselves?
Well, to answer that, that's why we spend money on insurance. And our decisions should be driven by what's best and not by a fear of something coming back on us. So if we can get 10, we've been talking about this for a long time, and we give him the authority to spend 10 on these identified dangers, I'm fine with that. I'm just trying to stay within our fiscally conservative mindset.
I think we should go ahead and do what we prioritized already, do the survey, and then reconvene and decide how to proceed afterwards. I think just to allocate 10,000 arbitrarily
Up to
is
10,000. It doesn't have to be up to
Yeah,
10,000.
I don't think
premature.
the motion doesn't anticipate not doing the survey. The motion directs the village agent to do the work necessary to assure that we manage our tree resources, take them down or prune them as necessary with the guidance of Benner, but don't wait until August to start spending if it's under $10,000 to do what's recommended.
Lee?
We're basically giving Bill our go-ahead to use his best knowledge. I mean, who do you trust? We trust him with everything else in the village.
Right.
I mean, wouldn't you trust him to do this? I do.
Sorry.
Can I just, is there a protocol in case, let's say it's 10,500, is there a protocol where you could be, sort of, it can be an email group right away, you don't have to wait until August 8th, so this thing can still be taken care of?
No, but
Or you have to wait until August 8th?
So
Right.
what we would do is we would give a prioritized order to Bill in terms of taking care of things. So if it was just $500 more, then, probably that ash tree in Ruggles Park would be done last because it's a smaller amount, and it probably doesn't have the same level of safety issues as associated with some of these other ones. So again, a prioritized list allows us to do up to $10,000, but then come back in August to revisit it and fund the rest of it based on what the actual cost.
Right.
At this point, I just want to mention that I had a conversation with Jane Strauss. The phrase survey has been used. I was using the phrase audit. I think that our trees are as much a part of the infrastructure of this village as the building that we're in right now. And I think it would behoove us to have some clear, I call it an audit, that would indicate for all the significant trees that are on public land here, roughly how old they are, what kind of tree they are, and what their status is in terms of how many more years we think they have or when we have to address them or not. And we could then have a document that we could look at over time and say, well, in 2021, we think we need to address these 5 trees and start to set aside realistic budgets rather than in July anticipating what might happen to them in the next month.
Ms. Janey started that out in 1998. We had an actual formal tree audit and counting of the trees and condition of the trees, and then she did it regularly. We always had the arborist do the crews in the spring and the fall. But what we didn't do was take that knowledge out of her brain and record it so that we would be able to then translate that into the future when she left us.
Jane knew the condition of every tree. basically.
Right.
But now we need to have a process of documenting what we say about these trees, what we learn about the trees, because we have to be reminded that none of us are going to be at the table 20 years from now.
I was under the impression we were getting a new tree. What has happened with that process?
Wait, we're going to have a separate discussion.
All right.
So I'd like to make a motion that we authorize the village agent to spend up to $10,000 on the trees in the places that we have talked about, Auditorium Park, Bayview Park, Ruggles Park, and the cherry tree if it fits within the up to $10,000, and get the work done appropriately to address those trees.
I'll second if you clarify that it's the work we're doing includes the replacement within that limit.
Yes, includes the pruning, taking down, and replacement in
Just
accordance with our
steps.
ordinances as appropriate.
Second.
So the motion is for Bill to have up to $10,000. Does that include the current 1,700 or so that's sitting in the budget that hasn't been used?
Yeah, it's not in addition to. We'll draw that line down and we'll draw down contingencies.
And that's including the replacement cost?
Yes, that's in accordance with the tree.
And then we know that that's probably not going to be enough to take care of everything, but it'll take care of a lot. And it will stop this management of some of this.
So we're in discussion now, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a second. Is there a discussion now?
Yeah, so and I'm assuming, I mean, we sort of put a prioritized order in that motion a little bit, but I'm assuming based on the investigation that's done, if our priority is wrong, that it will be updated appropriately.
But basically, it's Auditorium Park, Ruggles Park, the Ashland Ruggles Park, and Bayview. And we already have a price on Bayview.
We have a price on the ash.
And we have a price on the ash, which is essentially 800 plus years, 1,100 plus new trees, 500, 1,600 for the ash, 1,000 for Bayview, which leaves about 7,500 or so left over to conclude Auditorium Park. That's how I figured out.
Right, but the motion prioritized Auditorium Park
At the top.
of that. So we flip in the dollars.
Lee?
Question, there was discussion earlier about putting in new trees. If we put them in and people park on the root balls, should we maybe have a plan for that first before we put the new trees in?
We will have to have a plan. We aren't going to waste that resource.
Sorry to interrupt, but maybe if we could vote on this motion and then have a second motion that maybe addresses parking near new trees when they're put in place, that has a temporary parking restriction, and then we can deal with parking a little bit in a broader.
Further discussion? Paul?
I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here. The only tree that's going to be replaced is the ash. None of the other trees that I've seen need replacement urgently. So I think we're a little bit ahead of ourselves. I think we should deal with that in another meeting. I think there's some complexity to it in that we have to designate some parking area. Then if we're not going to let them park on existing trees, I think that's a whole discussion right there. So,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, no.
I agree with you that the second piece of it, the replacement of the trees, is going to be much more complex. I simply emphasize it, as you can see, because our ordinance requires replacement. We obviously don't replace the tree that we're merely pruning, but we may be taking down some trees in Auditorium Park, and therefore, under ordinance, we must replace it. Under this vote, that $10,000 gets us to August 13th to talk about it further. If we talk about parking after, it would be folly to today resolve a parking conversation about Auditorium Park without another ad hoc committee that has substantial representation from the people who will see that as their parking space. And
Right.
we need to figure it out. Urban forest mandates are 6 foot, a 30-foot, 6 square foot box around every single tree for the first 5 years of its life. So if we're at the point of, if these trees are draining water and therefore dead, if we have to take them out, we have to put one in. We have to have a conversation with the people about what that means to them and help them come up with some good ideas about what
I've
to
looked at
do.
the trees, the only one that needs to be replaced is the one ash tree.
Right, which is
The
why
others-
Mr. Benner is gonna look at it,
The
because we all
others are
have to
still
look
well
at this.
established.
Can we have a vote, please, on this? All in favor of the proposal, and there's a motion on the floor which you missed. The motion started with Wendy, was seconded by Judy, is to allocate up to $10,000, including replacement costs for a tree, to address the identified tree needs in Auditorium Park, Ruggles Park, and Bayview Park,
As well as the cherry tree and
Yeah,
the fungus.
as well as number 4 is in parentheses, the cherry tree in Ruggles Park, if we have room for that. So it's $10,000, Auditorium Park, Ruggles Park, Bayview Park, that Bill will coordinate. Essentially, we're giving Bill the authority to make those decisions with the tree warden and Benner's Tree Service. All in favor? 6 opposed? 1 is Paul Meyer. And I agree about that it is a complex matter to talk about the parking in Auditorium Park. Let's first get an arborist in there to tell us what the heck is going on.
Right,
Thank you, Wendy, for your clarity on that.
Wendy?
Just one last thing, and I don't know if we need a motion for it, but if we do plant new trees, then I think we have to have some boundary around that new tree so that we're not wasting our money. So I don't know if we need to have a vote that says that if any new tree goes in any of these parks, that the, parking restrictions are put in around that specific tree, so that it does not impact the village asset.
I think the timeline's gonna help us on that, Wendy. It's naive to think that any tree is gonna be planted before our next meeting. So he will report to us as to what we learn.
Okay.
New and continuing business. I've indicated here a reminder of the next 3 overseers meetings, and there is going to be on Tuesday, August 8th, which is the day of the annual meeting. We have, for the last few years, had a quick prep meeting for the overseers downstairs here, where we just go over with Tim sort of the process for how the annual meeting runs, who stands up when, who talks when, how it all goes. We found it to be very helpful just to re-clarify for everybody sort of how the annual meeting takes place. That's a public meeting, but it's really just as I say, prep. The annual meeting itself will take place upstairs at 6:30, and I believe Mr. Samway has once again agreed to be our moderator for this year.
If asked, he will serve.
If asked, he will serve, but not forever. Immediately following that meeting, the new overseers and the new officers come downstairs here, and as Judy indicated, are sworn in, and there's a few bank statements that the treasurer has to sign in terms of our bonds, etc. That's very brief. That's a matter of minutes. And then Sunday, August 13th, which is 5 days later at 8 a.m., we will have our first, to my knowledge, August full overseers meeting. And the determination to have this, which was agreed to, by the way, unanimously by this board, was because it was recognized that there is sufficient amount of business that occurs in the summer that to take August off really didn't work anymore. And that we had to have a meeting in August. And to go from the annual meeting to the mid-September meeting was just too big a jump. So we're going to have a meeting there. It's going to be at the Drinkwater School. They have graciously, they're excited about hosting us. It's going to be in their library. We'll have them put it up on their sign there. And what I am recommending is that we have a document, and I've written one up cleverly, that says August meetings of the Northport Village Corporation, which are now passing around, which says exactly what I've just said, that there are 4 meetings. There's one at 6 o'clock, there's the annual meeting, there's a 6:30, and there's an August 13th one. That'll be a single sheet that get posted around so that John doesn't have to go putting up multiple sheets and people get confused. This tells people what's happening in August.
I need to remind you that I cannot make the annual meeting, any of those meetings that day, because my milker will be in Vermont.
So the annual meeting will be at Lee's Farm.
Yeah.
Well, and,
The 6 o'clock meeting before anyway.
I need to
milking
apologize.
bar.
I won't be at the meeting either. I'll be at a business meeting in Bozeman, Montana.
And so for those of you who have the luxury of voting for some really good public servants, my understanding is that both Lee and Wendy have committed to put their name on the nominating committee slate again, and their absence at that meeting should not be a disincentive to vote for either of them, because as you all have probably noticed today, we would not be as far down the road on a daily basis as we are without both of them at this table. So I know they're getting my vote, and I encourage you to vote for them.
It will be a full slate that is proposed, I believe, a slate will be proposed by the nominating committee at that meeting.
When are we going to assign the term, the length of term for each candidate?
That doesn't come
That
till
doesn't
the
come
year.
next year.
That's it, it all happens next year.
After
You
the
have a year to
bylaws
figure that out.
change. Yeah, the bylaws, you gotta change the bylaws first.
Okay, first.
Bylaws kick in next year, so we've got a year to fight.
All right, okay, yeah.
The annual meeting 2018, the voters will choose who
All
has
right.
which term.
Paul, historically, people have volunteered for the term.
Did you guys see that sheet that I passed around
Do we have
on this
that
side?
I don't know.
This is just basically the language I just read
Do
you,
we
which
know
is,
that ahead
I'm
of time?
proposing putting that up and giving that
They
to
don't, but you
Send
can
it out as a
tell
single
us
sheet,
separately than telling
just
you
so that it's a handy dandy resource.
Thorn in my side.
It's the same committee.
There will be an executive session. It will be brief, since I just heard a groan.
Who was that?
Is there any other business new or continuing to address? Hearing none, thank you. We'll go into executive session.
Can I just announce that there's going to be a great concert this afternoon at 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock, from the